I can do this. I can do this. Yeah. Oh, give 'Perfect. Thank you. Hey. Uh, 15. They have 15 minutes total. Yeah. Hey. Hi. Name is Campbell. Nice to finally meet you. Thank you so much for scheduling. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And not just like have a heart attack. Yeah, and thank you for being accommodating on everything. Yeah. Yeah. And then we call dibs of night first, and then two other clubs say, like, oh, yeah, we're doing it, but it's Manhattan. So they, of course, we're always traffic. Maybe the coach would be. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get started in a minute. So.
Doing all these things, whether it's IND or these other things. So when are you ever going to do work here or you? Oh, good. Nice place to work, right? I really like it. Yeah. It's good work.
If everyone to start try and find their seats, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
We still should do it.
There's before, like after Jamani. Okay. Okay, I guess we'll get started then. Yeah. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Brooklyn Democratic Public Advocate and Comptroller Forum. My name is Seamus Campbell. I'm the president of the Independent Neighborhood Democrats. That never gets old. Thanks, Ira. And I'm going to be serving as your MC this evening. So co-moderating this evening with me will be representatives from the other reform clubs here in Brooklyn. Just to shout them out, we have Justine Dowden from BKForge. Yeah. Carlos Calzadilla from Brooklyn Young Democrats. Diana Gonzalez from the Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats. Zoe Gabby from Get Organized Brooklyn by Day. Yeah. Joseph Crisicone from Indivisible Brooklyn. Joe Jordan from Lambda Independent Democrats. And last but not least, also our phenomenal videographer this evening, Tony Malone from New Kings Democrats. So each of us is going to be taking turns posing questions to the candidates. Just so everyone understands how things will be going this evening, each candidate will come up and have one segment of 15 minutes total for both opening remarks and answer rebuttals, answering questions from the moderators. We encourage candidates to keep their opening remarks brief so they have more time to answer questions. The questions that candidates will be asked were sourced from the questions submitted by members of the clubs when they upon registration, and then the organizers did their best to try to condense them into common themes. Making sure I get through everything. We extended invitations to all Democratic public advocate and comptroller candidates who have registered committees to the Campaign Finance Board. And to ensure that everyone has a fair experience and equal time, we ask you, the members of the audience, to please refrain from heckling, shouting, and other distracting gestures towards the candidates and moderators. Anyone causing a disturbance will be asked to leave, and if there are any interruptions, the clock will be paused and yielded back to the candidate until order is restored. Also, of course, we would like to give a huge shout out and thanks to Brooklyn Law School for their usage of the space, all their staff. You know, they could not have been more accommodating for this, and our mayoral forum about 3 weeks ago. So a huge shout out to them. And yeah, thank you. Okay. So with that all out of the way, I'd like to call Justine Dowden from BKForge to start us off.
Thank you very much for being here. So Marty Dolan, if you're here, yeah, please take a seat. Thank you very much. Yes. Mhm. Nice to meet you too.
Right.
So our first public advocate candidate is Marty Dolan, a retired Wall Street insurance executive who most recently ran for Congress in New York's 14th district. Welcome, Mr. Dolan. If you can please introduce yourself and your platform.
Yeah, sure. So I consider that I've been a business doctor for the last 45 years. I've probably worked on over 500 businesses, many of them very complex problems. So it starts with my prescription for New York, for the Democratic Party, and you could go broader than that. And I think the one who said it best was Hakeem Jeffries. I think he said it in the last week, which is that you've seen this kind of the Republicans have been in charge and the Democrats have been in charge and they're back and forth. And I think it's because we really haven't got the answer as a society. I think that there's genuine uncertainty about what the right way forward is. From my perspective, what I see is that the threat is not the Republicans, the threat is not the Democrats or the far left wing of the Democrats, but it's the effects of technology on our society. There's this old story they tell about the two mice or the gerbils that are in the cage and they shock the floor and they end up, fighting with each other. So we're kind of fighting with each other over something that's happening to all of us, which is technology is really hunting our jobs. At first, technology really helped us. We could shop from home and you could get a cheap flight and all that, you can have a selfie, all that. But the effects of technology are to hunt down jobs, to make us more insecure economically, and to challenge our basic economic structure. And if that's the diagnosis, then I think the platform sort of falls from that, which is we need to do everything we possibly can to lower the cost of our government and educate our workforce as fast as possible.
Thank you. So the Public Advocate's Office has a citywide bully pulpit. On which top issues do you plan to focus your advocacy?
Well, I think I just gave it to you, which is I think what we should be doing is radically lowering the cost of government. I think there's a lot of waste. I kind of compare it to a game of Tom and Jerry right now, where you've got the public advocate who's fighting with the mayor, and it's not the first time. And then we had the previous mayor, who was fighting with the governor. And there's fantastic amounts of waste of your tax dollars and everybody's tax dollars, when what we need to be doing is getting smarter. We need more jobs. We shouldn't be turning down jobs. We need to really think of ourselves as an economic engine and get as many good jobs as possible in New York City. And then the weak link in the chain right now is the school system, where we're turning out kids with an out-of-date curriculum who are totally unprepared to convert from what I call being learners and turning them into earners. So they're kind of doing okay until they're 10 years old, and then they hit the wall and they get lost and their families don't know what to do with them. These are broad generalizations, of course. And you're turning out a percentage of kids that are college ready that is embarrassing for, which is a very high values, very complex city. And we have a school system that's really not producing what we need to be a successful economic engine.
And what legislation do you plan to introduce, and how would you work with the city council to advance it?
Okay, so you've got to go way up if you're going to abstract and be thinking about what it's like to be an elected official for a big thing like New York City, which is 8 million people. You really have very few tools. One of the tools you have is the tax system. What I'm proposing is that we have no taxes until you're 25 years old, and that the taxes that you would pay go into a home ownership account. Now, this directly relates to my view of the overall problem, which is I want the kids when they're 15 to start saving money so they can buy a house when they're 25 or 30. I want them to have every incentive. Second thing is I want the parents to be connected to their kids' taxes. I want parents to be able to have a perpetual rebate on their kids' taxes. So let's say that you're 60 and you have a couple of kids and maybe they're paying $40,000 of taxes. You should get 15% of that against your taxes. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to create an earnings mentality that connects families to each other instead of a non-earnings mentality that connects kids to this idea that the city is going to take care of them for the rest of their lives. So I want to create this focus from the time kids are 10 years old, 15 years old, that their job of their families is to educate their kids. The job of the school system is to educate their kids. And that's the team effort that should go on for life. And in the successful sub-communities around New York, that is exactly what you see was happening. And the last thing is we have 400,000 people living in public housing. My proposal is that we should find a way to get mortgages for the most able to take the mortgages, and we should try to lift up the city from the bottom by getting the people who are the long-term residents of public housing to become owners of their properties. So really what I'm talking about is changing the culture of New York City so that it's really an economically hungry city, because that's the environment that I perceive that we're in.
What criteria will you use as public advocate when making appointments to various government commissions and boards?
Okay, so I was asked the other night, what did you learn from the private sector that you could take into the public sector? This is a great example of that question. So the one thing that you learn in the public sector, I work for JP Morgan, I work for a lot of big firms, is you do not appoint your best friends to important jobs. You appoint the best possible people for each role. And I think that's what you need is you have outstanding human capital all over New York City. They're leaders in every field, in every industry, every artistic field. We should get the best people for each job.
On which city agency or agencies would you focus your recommendations for reform? Which tools of the public advocate office would you deploy?
I think we need to focus on the school system. I think the results of the school system, and they're not because the teachers aren't trying, and they're not because we're not spending enough money, because we're spending more money than any other place in the world. We have to change the curriculum, which means we need to work with New York State. We need to stand up and say, what is the curriculum that you would teach a 10-year-old? And think about this yourselves. Go back in your mind's eye and think about what they taught you in social studies when you were in the 5th grade. And then after that, and all the stuff that you learned, and think about it in the context of how that hasn't changed. They're still teaching the same curriculum. And so this is a very tough thing, but I want our school system to be as good as the rest of New York is. And it's not.
Given the federal administration's focus on mass deportation and ICE collaboration, how do you plan on using the powers of the public advocate's office to protect immigrant New Yorkers?
Well, I don't agree that New York should have been a sanctuary city in the first place. I don't think it makes any sense that you have a city in any country that has a policy that's different than the federal government. So I think it's a mistake. And I think the role of the public advocate is to make sure that the law is applied equally. So as far as the law states, that's what you have to do, is you have to make sure that the law is applied equally.
How do you plan to use the oversight and investigations powers of the Public Advocate's Office to protect New Yorkers against corruption?
I think it does start with the appointments. I think you can't let the mayor just appoint whoever they are. You have a system at the federal level where the appointees are interviewed. This public advocate was completely asleep at the switch as Adams just appointed whoever he wanted, irrespective of their capabilities. And then I think you have along with the comptroller, you have great powers of audit and discovery. I find it astonishing that New York City found $6 billion in its budget, which is your money, and could have been put into the schools, it could have been put into the subways, it could have been put somewhere else. The public advocate could have found that money. If I was public advocate, I would have found it because I have a finance background, and they gave it away to people from Venezuela and China.
As public advocate, how would you balance the role as a watchdog for the mayor while also collaborating with the administration where possible to advance the interests of all New Yorkers?
I think, when I was in Miami the other day, I was walking down Lincoln Road, and I was struck by the fact that there's a road in Miami named Lincoln Road. And then I looked it up, and there must be 700 or 800 streets and counties and cities, towns named after Abraham Lincoln. And the reason that all those things are named after him, and the reason, for example, that you have the Moynihan train station that was named after Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan never set foot in the Moynihan train station, is because you have to be selfless. You have to, you're really an architect of the future when you're in government. And what we have devolved into, I'm afraid, is this caricature of like politicians are give me this, give me that, or I have a gimmicky red dress, or I have a gimmicky hat, or I have a gimmicky slogan. And people look at me and they're like, well, there's nothing gimmicky about you. I'm like, I'm really sorry. But you just have to be selfless. You have to think about what the right thing is for the future. And then, you're doing the right thing.
So, my last question for you is in your answers on the NYC Votes website, you cite federal funding and legislation as the path to solving issues with housing, homelessness, schools, and healthcare in our city. Now that we have a federal government that's hostile to New York City and to public assistance programs in general, would you revise your answers?
I can't recall what the question was exactly, but I would just remind everybody the basic math, which is of New York City's and New York State's combined $350 billion budget, we get $120 billion from the federal government. And yet the people in this city somehow think they should defy the federal government. Well, that just doesn't make any sense. So what the federal government is going to do is what they did when I studied New York City's bankruptcy, and I wrote my college thesis on why New York City went bankrupt. The federal government told New York City to drop dead when I was growing up. And the New York budget has gone from $40 billion to $120 billion in 20 years. So the city's budget has tripled in 20 years, and things have gotten worse. So I don't think we should have an unharmonious relationship with the federal government. I think that we are part of a federal structure, and it's pointless to pretend that we're not. And I think at the end of the day, what we have to do is lower our costs. The budget of New York City is beyond the comprehension of somebody who's been a business doctor for 45 years, has a master's in business. If I had a team of people, you can't figure it out. It's way too complicated, and we have to simplify it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure. It's a beautiful room. Very much.
The schedule got a little mixed in.
That's okay.
Thanks for being.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Tony Malone, president of New Kings Democrats. And next up, we have another candidate for public advocate, technologist Theo Chino. He has run for public advocate previously. Welcome, Theo.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So we'll give you a few moments just to give your pitch to the voters, and then I'll ask you a few questions.
Perfect. I'll be very quick. I am a socialist. I'm the socialist leader of the socialist faction inside the Democratic Party. And all we're asking is to create a socialist caucus in the Democratic Party in the state of New York. We have a logo, a beautiful flower. It's a rose held by a hand. What we're asking is very simple. We are very radical. We're asking for free university. We're asking for the anti-death penalty. We are pro-abortion. That means we are not going to do anything against abortion. We are universal healthcare. Those are very radical things that about 75% of the world have implemented. So we don't know why we cannot do it here. We believe in the separation of church and state. That is very important. And what was the last thing? I forgot. Oh, yes, we are for the human. Everybody gets a human chance to do whatever they feel and like. And the state should provide a way to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to maximize their ability. Famous socialist American. I was thinking of the guy who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance. He was a socialist. Who else? MLK was one. So we can go on, but I will stop there. We have 146 years of history, and I wish everybody look it up.
Thank you.
That's my opening speech. That's who I am, and that's what you're voting for.
Okay. The Public Advocate's Office is a citywide bully pulpit. So what would you use that bully pulpit for if you were elected to this position?
Well, I am a very good screamer, so I would scream against corruption so loud. I am myself a victim of corruption. My rent last month, where I grew up and I was born, went from $200 to $2,000 overnight. And for the last 20 years, we've been asking, where is the money going? And a project of 100 apartment ended up for low income about $100 million. And now they're asking us to pay that money by raising our rent. And they're looking at the location of the building to say, oh, that building is worth X number of dollars. So that's what happened. They promised us Section 8, they promised us a lot of things. And as I went around to look for what the problem was, I realized maybe it's where the politicians are and what is holding them back in following the money and not following what the people need. And that's why I'm running for public advocate today. And as Bully Puppet, we will be discussing every socialist topic on the table. So education, what's wrong with the school, what's wrong with the subway, what can we do better, where can we put the money better use, et cetera, et cetera. So as a Bully Puppet, I'm very good at shouting.
Thank you. What legislation would you plan to introduce, since the public advocate can introduce bills? And how would you work with the city council to advance this legislation?
So when I ran the first time in 2020, 5 years ago in 2018, at my club, the For Freedom Democratic Club, I would like to introduce the Post Act, which is an act about technology and the police use of technology. During the Black Lives Matter, that bill got passed finally. And so now I have to find a new bill to champion. And that one is simply to put the private public contract on the passport computer system so tenants all around the city can go and figure out, without having to do FOIL that never get answer, they can get the answer of where the money that the developer are using to remanufacture their building, they can have access at the community board. It's basically a bill that Carolyn Maloney introduced a long time ago. Ben Callos after that added the computerized part. And I'm saying we need to have everything in that in those computers and accessible at the community board, at each community board by anyone who wants to look into where the public money is spent when given to a private entity. That's one bill. We'll start with that small one. Many of the city council members told me they would introduce it. I've been waiting 6 years for that introduction. So as well run for public advocate and introduce it. Most likely the city council will not be friendly on that. They haven't, but the goal of the public advocate is to do what's right and not to appease the city council. So we are there to be a voice of balance and check, check and balance. So public advocates will be the check on the city council when they don't introduce a bill correctly.
Thank you. What criteria would you use as public advocate when making appointments to various government commissions and boards?
So I am a socialist. I am part of a big network of socialists from around the world, in the Socialist International, the Progressive Alliance. So in our group of people, we have the mayor of Paris is a socialist, the mayor of Rome is a socialist, London, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a network of people who are social democrat that knows how to run city to make them livable. And that's a network of people that exists right here in New York, but are not participating in the Democratic Club because they cannot stand it. But they are here in New York. And those are the people I want to appoint to those positions, people who know social democracy and who know how to run a city based on science-based fact of running a city. So that's how I will look for my appointments. The best and the brightest social democrat around New York.
Okay. On which city agency or agencies would you focus your recommendations for reform? So what agency do you think is most in need of reform, and what tools would you use?
Well, HPD is very personal to me. So we're going to start with housing. Housing is a human right. So because housing is a human right, we need to look at the organization that runs that. So HPD is full of problems and they need to be fixed and looked at and investigated. And the two previous controllers promised me they would do it. And I'm still waiting to this day. That was 6 years ago.
Okay. And given the federal administration's focus on mass deportation and ICE collaboration, how do you plan on using the powers of the Public Advocate's Office to protect immigrant New Yorkers?
Well, it's a bully puppet position, so I will scream abolish ICE. AOC did it in 2018. I believe that. Contrary to my predecessor, New York is a city of immigrants. We come from everywhere, and we never participated in the racist policy that this country has put up to keep us away from the United States. So having to deal with the city, with people's fear, and giving public service as a city, it is normal that we became a sanctuary city. Mayor Koch was right. Giuliani, as a Republican, never took it out because he realized that he couldn't get his police force to work with the community. And socialism is also the right of protection. So being secure in his life, in his dream, is a socialist tenet. So you need to have a police force that you can rely to make sure that everything is done correctly. So we need, as a public advocate, I will make sure the NYPD doesn't work with ICE and that the police officer do not give under the table information to ICE. And we'll need to be pay a lot of attention to those fraternity, like the police union, who are very friendly with the ICE union. So we need to make sure there is no back deal happening.
Thank you. How do you plan to use the oversight and investigations powers of the public advocate to protect New Yorkers against corruption?
Well, I think I answered that, but yes, I will use all the power. Unfortunately, the public advocate doesn't have subpoena power. So the agency of the mayor will sit on it like they've been doing so well. So one bill that the previous public advocate, if I remember from 2019, said they would introduce bill to have subpoena power. We're 6 years later, no bill have been introduced. So that's the second bill I will introduce. Subpoena power to the public advocate so he can work hand in hand with the DOI, the Department of Investigation, and the council member in charge of that. committee.
Okay, thank you. And as public advocate, how would you balance the role as a watchdog for the mayor while also collaborating with the administration where possible to advance the interests of New Yorkers?
Well, as I said, I am not there to appease the city council. So if they're doing something or they're not doing something right, the power to put a bill forward and to have the attention of the media on that bill, we can have a discussion publicly if they don't want to have it privately. So I think we can do a lot with the public advocate that use the power of bill introduction can be very effective in calling out the colleague. And I don't plan. I'm a socialist; they're not. So usually we're already going on a ground that is very how you say that, very adversarial. Thank you. Yes, that's the word.
Okay,
So I have to say it out loud.
okay. And for our last question, this is
Yes.
something I have a little bit of personal experience with. You started an organization called Rep My Block, which is very similar to Rep Your Block and tries to fill a similar role of helping people run for county committee. You also are promoting SDA, Social Democrats of America, which sounds very similar to DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. Are you just taking the names of other organizations and changing them a bit to trick people into organizing with you?
Absolutely not. And first of all, SDA was the first SDA was created by Eugene Debs back in 1800. So where we we went back to our root. The socialist history of 140 years is full of drama. And Lenin was one of them. When he created his Communist Party, he left the Socialist Party and he took 75% of the membership who voted for him, and he created the Communist Party up in Russia. And there is more history in there. But he decided to create his party to be a better socialist, and he even called his country the Union of Socialist Republic. So he didn't have, and yet that became communism because he used the Karl Marx Communist Manifesto. So the history of drama and confusion within the socialist movement is very old. And the Rep My Block, Rep Your Block discussion, we're doing the same thing differently. And it is an homage to New King's Democrat for the name that they have picked for their program, because it is that, it's about representing your block. But then when we had a discussion 6 years ago, and I felt a little bit disrespected when I was saying let's work together, and they were talking about branding. What it is the brand? And I'm like, guys, we're going to have this discussion, so fine. And I went and I registered Rep My Block on a spur of the moment, and it was a brand fight that happened with Coca-Cola and Pepsi. It doesn't have to be adversarial, but we can have fun, and we're doing the same thing. So we're complementing each other. The movie on PBS, we have a PBS documentary that you can find on pbs.org/show/county. Rep Your Block. It is named in the closing remark. Your organization is the reason we did what we did. SDA is the same thing. Is a little bit the same thing because DSA, I was a lifetime member of DSA, and DSA came to my house in my neighborhood and told me I wasn't a socialist after 20 years of card-carrying member of the French Socialist Party. So suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And out of that, we started writing inside DSA, we need to come back to our socialist root. Didn't happen. So we do what we do in socialism, we split. And so SDA and DSA are another split between social democracy and democratic socialism, which at the end of the day is socialism, but done differently and putting the accent on different part. So you can see that DSA landed on the Anti-Defamation League. They have a very nice website that explains the whole history. Go check it out. And that's the difference. But it is not about copying. It's about working together, not confusing. We're very open about how we came about. And the history book in 20 years will tell the story, hopefully.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear us, Ishmael?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. I don't know which way to face. Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Gonzalez. I'm from the Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats. Thank you. And joining us here is Ismail Malave, our first comptroller candidate of the evening. He's a veteran of city government who's worked in the offices of the city comptroller, the public advocate, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, just to name a few. So welcome, Mr. Malave. You have 15 minutes for both questions and just your opening statement. So feel free to go ahead. Oh,
Well,
also,
thank you
you'll see, hold on, sorry. You'll see the minute, the timer. This is going to be what the timer looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, go ahead. Are you on mute? You're still on mute.
Somehow I got muted. I don't know how. My
Great.
name is Ismail Malave. I'm a graduate of Brooklyn Automotive High School, and so I used to be a wrenchman. I basically thank you for having me today because as a candidate, I'm really excited about the race. I'm a moderate Democrat in the middle, someone who completely understands the city's finances and, more importantly, the city's operations. What I aim to do ultimately as the next comptroller is save taxpayer dollars, protect taxpayer dollars, and make prudent investments in the city's pension systems. Out of all the candidates, I'm honored to say that I have the most experience, having worked for 5 comptrollers. That's 5 comptrollers, 3 state and 2 city comptrollers. In the city, I managed close to $2 billion of the city's pension systems, conducting real estate financial investment analysis. And I'm really excited because I have 27 years of public service. Unlike the elected officials that on day one, they need to learn about the office and how it operates. I pretty much have the experience there. And I know what it takes to protect taxpayer dollars. I want to utilize the power of the audit to protect and safeguard and make sure that services are being adequately distributed through the city's funding process. I'm an administrative procurement analyst for DCAS, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, where I generate income through a platform called GovDeals, and I monitor and process auctions on behalf of the city. Like Pete Davidson bought one of the Staten Island ferries, right? He bought it from the auction platform that I manage. We also sold a train that was parked in front of Queensboro Hall. We made money from that. I also processed the city's scrap metal. So it's a dynamic opportunity to elect someone that not only has been working for 27 years as a public servant and helping people out, but I'm a real New Yorker. I have an economics degree from Lehman College and an MBA from CUNY Harvard, the Zicklin School of Business, and at Baruch. And I'm really, really just adamant about the opportunity because I want to bring common sense back into government. And I want to make sure that I depoliticize the New York City Comptroller's Office. It's time to look out for the middleman, right? And us, all of us, it's time to elect one of us, a real New Yorker, somebody that grew up in the Bronx, went to Brooklyn Automotive High School, went to Manhattan, colleges in Manhattan, and loves Queens, and of course, adores Staten Island. And as your guy, I want you to know that I have your back. It's time to support someone that's going to do the best job in the position of New York City Comptroller. My name is Ismail Malave. Please look me up. And I'm talking to everyday New Yorkers. The cost of living is ridiculous. These proposals that have been put forth are kind of ridiculous because I want to know who's going to pay for them. Here I am being affected by congested pricing. I'm being affected by the city of Yes. I'm being affected by so many other policies that sometimes elected officials just implement without thinking about the consequences about how it's going to affect the taxpayer. And at the end of the day, my job is going to be to protect the taxpayer. And my name is Ismael. Please, I look forward to your questions, and I'm giving you the opportunity to select a guy that really understands the office.
Wonderful. All right, let's take it away. My first question is, what will be your first audit?
So one of my first audits will be at the New York City Department of Homeless Services, because during the migrant crises, a lot happened with all these emergency contracts. Folks were coming in and I'm sorry, somebody was we're driving, a car just jumped in front of us. During the migrant crises, the mayor's office was given a blank check. Entities were giving contracts with the city, and we need to go back and make sure that these contracts make sense. We lost millions of dollars. We want to make sure that the services are being provided. That's one of the first audits. Second audit will be either NYCHA. NYCHA definitely needs to be audited. I know it's an authority, and I will work with the governor's office and the city to make sure that NYCHA gets audited to see how we can help NYCHA. The Department of Education is my third audit, and that's in order. But everyone knows or should know that the Comptroller's responsibility is to audit every single agency at least once per year. And I will make sure that that mandate is completed by the time next year comes around, once I get elected. Secondly, I will revisit or audits that were sort of swept under the rug, because there were several audits that were conducted, and agencies got a slap in the wrist, and I want to go and revisit those audits. I'm somebody that's conducted investigatory audits on inventory control management, and my ultimately mandate will be to save taxpayer dollars, to eliminate waste, fraud, and corruption, and reallocate those funds to where they need to go, and that's for services from everyday New Yorkers.
All right. So on that note, how would you protect city taxpayers from the misuse of city funds by both government and non-government actors, for example, companies and nonprofit organizations?
Sorry, somebody was trying to call me. Can you ask me the question again?
Yes. How would you protect taxpayers from misuse of city funds by government and non-government actors, such as companies and not-for-profits?
So, the way to protect taxpayers from say that again. I'm sorry. Can you please
from
ask the question
misuse
again?
How would you protect taxpayers from misuse of city funds?
Oh, okay. Thank you. The way to protect taxpayers from misuse of city funds is to identify where those issues exist and issue a subpoena and call individuals in to assure that no misappropriations were conducted, that there was it was an honest mismanagement. I identify where those funds went, and then reappropriate the funding to ultimately what they were allotted for or designated for. So I will make sure that those dollars are allocated. And also, one of the things that I plan to do is make a fair and open, transparent process where in real time, New Yorkers will be able to log on to identify where the funding is going.
All right. How would you use the office of the Comptroller in ways that current or past controllers have not?
So one of the things that I plan to do is institute a financial literacy program, which will help all New Yorkers, right, in managing dollars, learning how the office works, letting them know where pension investments are going. I will also make the contract and procurement process very transparent, and I will support minority businesses and minority business enterprises to get access. The lack of access to capital for New Yorkers and businesses in New York is going to be very fair, transparent. And what I want to do is I want to support DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's policies in place. I want to make sure that those policies do not get eliminated.
All right. What would be your top priorities when reviewing current pension investments and possible divestments? And what is your long-term vision for New York's financial future?
So that's very complex. So I know that a lot of people are talking about divesting from fossil fuels and other things. So first of all, off the bat, I'm pro green, right? But it has to make economic sense. And ultimately, who's going to pay for these things? All of New York City is not ready to go 100% green. So when it comes to divesting, and I want to make sure that we make prudent investments, I will lean on the team that ultimately is responsible, and that's in the Bureau of Asset Management, as well as the Chief Investment Officer, which the city appoints in the Bureau of Asset Management, to make sure that the investments and the decisions there are prudent. I will work with the boards. There's 5 boards, and I will make sure that the boards are happy with every decision that we make. And as your controller, I will make sure that all New York City retirees and employees' pension systems are safeguarded from political decisions, because I plan to depoliticize those decisions.
All right.
It's gotta make economic sense.
Okay. A week after the general election last November, the current controller issued a report called Protecting New York City, analyzing the risks that the Trump administration poses to the city's budget, economy, infrastructure, and people. Are you familiar with this report, and how would you address the biggest risks, including risks to New Yorkers, that the presidential administration poses?
Absolutely, I'm familiar with it. And I know that the federal government wants to basically, let's just call it like it is, chop up the funding sources for various programs at the federal level. There will be consequences, or the city will be negatively impacted. Our budget is going to be impacted. The state budget's going to be impacted. So we're going to have to make up for that gap, right? For these funding sources that will more than likely will not be there anymore. And I am somebody that will try to make sure that, one, I will protect our bond rating, to make sure that ultimately the golden rule of bonds is that the city's bond rating does not get negatively impacted. So we can't think about how these federal dollars, we can't depend only on the federal government. In other words, we got to make sure that our funding revenue streams are well taken care of, and we got to look at where we can make cuts on our end to save dollars. If there's funds in the city that need to be reappropriated to ultimately give the city residents and taxpayers the services required for the city to be safe, clean, the city that we all love, have enough affordable housing. We need to make sure that those stopgaps are in place. And so we already know that our budget for fiscal year 2025 is about to end, and we're about to go into fiscal year 2026. And the Comptroller's office is already talking about how our bond rating may go past the 15%, which is a scary situation considering that they're cutting all the federal dollars. So I'm somebody that understands how the dynamics of the finances of the city's work, of our city works, and I'm gonna make sure that we do extensive analysis on our finances in managing the city's debt, and reviewing the city's budget, and making sure that agencies are adequately and appropriately spending the city's finances, as well as safeguarding taxpayer dollars.
Okay. How will you use the power of the Comptroller's office to support tenant protections and enhance affordability for New Yorkers? You have 2 minutes remaining.
The city's, okay, so the city makes money from real estate, right? So the city makes money from taxes. And I know that people are talking about the city of yes and building affordable housing, but when you ultimately think about this, who's going to pay for it? I'm somebody that used to be a tenant myself. I have a tenant, and my tenant is one of the happiest tenants in the city. I can tell you that much. I'm gonna make sure the tenants' rights are protected, and anything within the law, I will make sure that I stand up for.
Okay. How would you use the controller's audit and investigation powers to respond to corruption and wasteful spending in the NYPD, such as the recent overtime scandal and the millions in settlements we pay annually for police misconduct?
Well, the minute I become controller, I want to review that audit, and I want to identify where the issues came up, and I want to make sure that we put safeguards in place to prevent that from ever happening again. Like I said, I want to make everything fair and transparent. New York City will have, under the Malave for Comptroller administration, a open portal where they can go and, bottom line, see where those dollars are being allocated and how they're being addressed and spent. So that's what I will do. I will go straight into those audits. Like I did say earlier, I will revisit any audits when I get elected to see how we can address any of the issues that came up.
All right. And I believe we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Ishmael.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored. I hope to get your endorsement. Fair Malave. Done? Yeah, hang on.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, so we actually have a few minutes to kill before. Well, actually, no, I only had this up because since we're switching between public advocate and comptroller candidates, we want to make sure everyone knows who's running for what. So we want to make sure things are as less confusing as possible. But is Theo still here? I'm sure you can email Theo and he will be glad to tell you the difference between SDA and DSA. This is all being recorded, right? So they probably are picking this up. So we have a few minutes to kill. So the organizers are just going to give a little brief overviews of each of our various organizations. As I mentioned, I'm the president of the Independent Neighborhood Democrats. It is the Democratic Club for the 52nd Assembly District, which all of you that are watching live or in person right now are in. So we have been around since 1970. We were started as a reform club, basically going against the county machine and a lot of their opposition to the Vietnam War. So mostly we try to make sure we run candidates for public office and party office that are reform minded. Half joke that we like to say is that we want to make sure that we have judges that know the law are not someone's brother-in-law. We, of course, run candidates for judicial delegate, judicial alternate, county committee, and basically everything up and down the ballot. And, of course, I'm going to have to say this. I'm sorry to all the other clubs. I love you all, but we were also ranked the number 6 political club in all of New York State. Yes. I'm sorry. Well, you can blame the editors at City and State for that, Diana, you want to come up next? Talk about CBID?
Hello, everyone. It's me again, Diana Gonzalez. I'm the immediate past president of the Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats and currently the district leader for the 44th Assembly District. Thank you. CBID has a similar origin story. We started in 1968. We've been an independent, reform-minded club ever since. What we have coming up is we will be having our next endorsement meeting on February 13th. We're going to endorse civil court judges. We'll endorse in the Brooklyn DA's race. We'll endorse for city council in a few council districts. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something. The mayor, yes, the mayor, the comptroller, the public advocate, the borough president, judicial delegates. If you want to know what that means, just find me after and ask me. And so it's a great way to get more involved in your community and to get face time with elected officials and hold them accountable for whatever things you want to hold them accountable for, just like we're doing right here. So who am I throwing it to next? Carlos?
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here in front of you in very normal times. So I'm Carlos Calzadilla. I'm the president of Brooklyn Young Democrats. We are the political club that represents all young people in Brooklyn. We're a reform political club. We endorse in elections. We're actually the only chapter in the entire state that endorses in primaries, which means that all the candidates want to talk to us, which is great. But we give a voice to young people here in this borough. We also stand up for our democratic ideals. We've been fighting in Southern Brooklyn for our Democratic candidates against Republicans, and we also have a lot of fun. If you know anyone, if you're yourself a young person who wants to get involved, things are crazy, things are happening across the country, but locally and organizing as young people, building community as we will do. So that's it about me. Who's next? You can go get, okay. Justine Dowden from BKForge.
Yes, I'm Justine Dowden. I'm a co-chair of BKForge, which stands for Brooklyn for Reproductive and Gender Equity. We are an all-volunteer grassroots group. We started right after Trump got inaugurated the first time, and we're very active in the Reproductive Health Act advocacy, and most recently put a lot of effort behind Prop 1, the New York Equal Rights Amendment, which passed with over 60% of the vote. And now we have a large legislative advocacy agenda now because, it feels like crises are coming from all over the place. But in general, our focus is abortion access and reproductive health care and justice. And I'll also plug our next event, which is on Saturday, the 8th, and it's our Palentine's party. So we are writing notes of thank you and Valentine's for independent abortion providers. And it's a very fun and uplifting, family-friendly event. We craft and drink and show our appreciation. So that's at Young Ethel's, which is a bar in South Slope, from 2:30 to 4:30 on Saturday.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Jordan /Jordan / however you want to pronounce it. I'm the president of Lambda Independent Democrats of Brooklyn, which is Brooklyn's largest, oldest, and only queer LGBTQ plus democratic reform club. Founded in 1978. Thank you. Not to say that I founded it in 1978. I would look great for that. We are dedicated to elevating queer voices in politics, especially in Brooklyn at the local level, protecting all members of our community. We're going to be doing so again this weekend. We're joining for the Trans Rise Up for Trans Youth Rally. That's going to be in Union Square at 1 p.m. You guys should join us for that. It's going to be a great time. And yeah, we cannot just be silent. As the old poster says, silence equals death. And we're going to see some shitty times coming ahead of us, everybody. But yeah, should I give this back to Seamus or? Oh, Tony. Yeah. Well, Tony, what? Tony or other Joe? One of the other Joes. Yeah, come on over.
Hey everyone, good evening. My name's Joe Crescioni, and I'm here representing Indivisible Brooklyn. Indivisible Brooklyn got its start similar to BKForge. It started with Get Organized Brooklyn that Brad Lambda he organized right after Trump won the very first time. A number of organizations came out of that, and Indivisible Brooklyn was one of that. we take our cues from the Indivisible National Playbook. So we're not really a political club. We're more of an action-driven type of club. So we do organizing, we do demonstrations, we do letter writing, we've done phone relays. We just about do everything. For example, last Sunday, we did a very ad hoc type of demonstration outside of Chuck Schumer's residence in Park Slope, Brooklyn, because the Democrats are pretty much not doing anything to fight Trump or the Trump agenda. And we've just pretty much had it. We're very angry. So we did that. We also had a fairly large group outside of both Schumer and Gillibrand's offices yesterday demonstrating. And we actually were able to sign letters. And Adam, who's also with Indivisible Brooklyn, was able to meet with representatives of Schumer, at least, right? I don't know if you met with Gillibrand's people. And we have another demonstration coming up this Saturday morning outside Chuck Schumer's residence. He lives on Prospect Park West, and we need to wake up these people because they have been sleeping on the job while our democracy is dying. So that gives you some idea of the passion that Indivisible Brooklyn has. And I'll finish by saying we had our first meeting yesterday after Trump actually took office. And there were well over 100 people squeezed into Danona Rosta, an Italian restaurant on 7th Avenue and Park Slope, because people are terrified and people want to feel like they're able to do something. So come to Indivisible Brooklyn. It's a great crew. We have pizza, and it's really a great organization, and I'm very happy to be part of it. So that's Indivisible Brooklyn. Thank you. And now Zoe, Gaby, also, our origins are kind of similar to ours.
Yes. Hello, everybody. So I'm Zoe Gabby, and I co-chair Go BK by Day. We also grew out of the larger group of Get Organized Brooklyn that Brad Lander started. And there were so many people when Trump first got into office that were so horrified and so needing to do something that it became pretty obvious very quickly that there were too many people and it was just too unwieldy. So we broke up into smaller groups. And so Get Organized Brooklyn by Day became one of those groups. And we meet every Thursday morning and have met every Thursday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. since we started back in 2017. April 2017 was our first official meeting. And except for a very short pause during the beginning of COVID, but then we started up again because we really needed it. We primarily, our action is primarily writing postcards or making phone calls. And we have speakers that come pretty much every week, whether they're candidates, elected officials, or people that want to speak about an issue that they are facing. For example, the Arrow Linen group came to speak a couple of times, and we wrote postcards and we did actions for them. And so, that's what we do. And so come and join us. If you feel like you really just want to get something off your chest, come join us. We meet right now at Zaytar's on 8th Avenue and 12th Street from 9 to 10 every Thursday morning. And we also meet, we're hybrid, so we also meet by Zoom. So you can also join us that way. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everybody again. I'm Tony Malone once again from New Kings Democrats. And New Kings Democrats was founded back in 2008 by some folks who had volunteered for the Obama presidential campaign and then decided they wanted to get involved in local politics. They went to the Brooklyn Democratic Party, and the Brooklyn Democratic Party said, no, thanks, we're good. So they were not deterred. Instead, they started a club, and we're still here trying to build a Brooklyn Democratic Party that welcomes participation, that engages with the grassroots and that is active in doing all the things that a party could do, such as winning elections, beating Republicans. We especially need to do that in Southern Brooklyn. We've lost a lot of seats recently. And to do that, we need a strong bench. We need a pipeline for candidates. And that's something NKD has been very focused on. We created Rep Your Block, which was discussed earlier today, the original, which is a program for anyone who wants to run for the lowest level of the Democratic Party, which is county committee. There are thousands of county committee seats in Brooklyn and everywhere in the city. Most of them go unfilled because people don't know about them. But anyone can run. You just need to collect a few signatures from your neighbor, and then you are an official in the Democratic Party. But those county committee members don't have a lot of power until we have party leaders that will empower them. So we are also recruiting candidates for district leader, which is the next level up, the leadership in the Brooklyn Democratic Party. And those folks are the ones that elect the party boss, the party chair. So we are always looking to support change-minded candidates for district leader who are willing to listen to Democrats, listen to the grassroots, and not just toe the line for the machine. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, check us out at newkingsdemocrats.com. We have general meetings every month. Everybody's welcome. Our next one is on February 27th. And we do other events in the community. We endorse candidates. We just endorsed Shahana Hanif for city council in the 37th council district, and we'll be looking at candidates for mayor soon and for all the other offices that are on the ballot this year. I'll also remind everybody that if you are not registered as a Democrat, I'm sure everybody here is in this forum, but if you know anybody who's not, who fancies themselves an independent, not that there's anything wrong with that, or may have registered as a Republican in a misguided moment, let them know that if they want to have any voice in who's representing them, being registered as Democrat is really the only game in town in New York City, in most of New York City, because the primary is when these elections are decided. That's why we're here tonight, to hear from candidates in the primary. And you have until February 14th to be registered as a Democrat if you want to have a say in this primary. So let your friends, let your neighbors know that they should get on that. And thanks everybody for being here. I think we're still waiting for the next candidate to show up. Some of our candidates had some traffic coming here, but I can turn it over to Adam, who can talk a little bit about his club. No, sorry. I don't tell jokes. We already heard from Joe. I was calling on you, Adam, because I was just with Adam the other day, and Joe, other folks outside, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand's offices in Midtown. And it was so inspiring to see, I mean, there's 14 organizations that showed up, about 300 people demanding that our senators, do more and take action to stop what's happening in Washington, D.C. And I think we're starting to see the results of that. I think that there really is a mass movement building that Democrats are not going to take this lying down, and that we need to use every tool to stop, President Musk or whoever it is from gutting our federal government. I did not bring an instrument, Howard. So I think I'm going to put Seamus on the spot and give it back to him, since he's our master of ceremonies for tonight. Maybe he can tell us a little bit about how this forum came together. And I'll say once again, thanks everybody for being here, and check out New Kings Democrats when you get a minute.
Actually, I'm going to pass things over to Susanna Pasquantonio, because she actually has an announcement about other ways that you can stay involved here. Do 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 do.
I never miss an opportunity. Okay, so I'm Susanna Pasquantonio, live in the area. Thank you so much for all being here tonight. And just want to make an announcement about another forum that's coming up this weekend. And it's a community forum to really mobilize local citizens, come together in light of the new federal administration and say, how do we still have power? How do we still protect immigrants? How do we still protect reproductive rights? How do we still find those little levers of power and push them, be it local, state, or federal? So So this is being hosted by Council Member Shahana Hanif, Assembly Member Joanne Simon, and Senator Andrew Gennardes, and several fantastic groups that a lot of you know of will be there. A representative from NICLU, a representative from York Immigration Coalition. So we will hear from them, but we will also have people ask questions so we can really think about how to mobilize our power and stay healthy, stay sane, but stay activated in the next 4 years. And I will just add that it's this Sunday, February 9th. So it's not the only good thing going on Sunday if you're a Super Bowl fan. And it's 12 to 2. It's at MS 51 Auditorium, and that's on Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn. Okay.
And since I guess for all intents and purposes we may be making money off of this with YouTube ads, she said superb owl for the record. No one understands that. It's a whole copyright thing. Yeah. Oh, it just wasn't funny. Okay. Wow. Way to make a guy feel good. Yeah. Yeah. So we're still waiting on our candidate, next candidate, who should be here like literally within the next minute or so. But who knows? Because I hate to put Danielle on the spot, but congestion pricing was supposed to work, and apparently hasn't been working fast enough. Yeah. I don't mean. So does everyone just hold tight, have a drink of water, talk amongst yourselves, use the restroom, whatever you want. We'll be back in like 2 minutes or so.
So we're still, but you know what, Jumanji was supposed to start at 7:45. Okay. And do you know, is Jennifer close? Okay. What about Justin Brannon? I see his campaign manager here. Should I see if he's close?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I figured that. I was just talking. Yeah. They went to the. What time? Yeah. Right. Then we have. Well, so I'm like, I don't really know that you know what that is. BKForge, she knows sometimes you're like, oh, I need a like good professional picture, and she's like, just send to Allison. I was like, you have her phone number, right? So
Oh, I'm up. Yay. I guess we're moving things around. Okay, how do we change that sign to say candidate for comptroller? Hold on. All things considered.
This is like inside the actor studio.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for humoring us for that little intermission there. Once again, I'm Joe Jordan, whatever. I don't even know anymore.
One of those nights.
One of those lives. President of Lambda Independent Democrats of Brooklyn. Our next candidate is for the office of Comptroller. It's Justin Brannon, the council member for the 47th District and the chairperson of the Committee on Finance. Councilmember Brannon has been in the city council since 2018. Welcome, Councilmember Brannon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we have, I think it's 15 minutes for this whole ordeal. Ordeal, yes. If there are any interruptions, the clock will be paused and that won't count against you. I will start with the first questions. We have our timekeepers, Susanna and Boomer right here. Yeah, and opening remarks. Sorry. I'm just giving the shout out. Yeah. So first, your opening remark. Take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. This is really the creme de la creme of Brooklyn clubs. We've fought in many battles together down in Southern Brooklyn, and I really have to start by saying we appreciate down in Bay Ridge that when these clubs come out and help us out every November, because we are one of the few districts in the city that have really tough and competitive general elections. And I just want to say thank you for all the help that you've given us over the past 15 years of fights that we've had down there. So thank you very much. It's great to be here tonight. I'm Councilman Justin Brannon, currently chair of the Finance Committee, where I oversee the largest municipal budget in the country at $115 billion. I didn't have a very conventional path to politics. I spent about 10 years on the road playing in a punk rock band. I learned 3 chords in McKinley Junior High School in Bay Ridge, and it afforded me a career as a professional musician. And now, as an elected official, as a politician, I fight really hard for increased funding for arts and music education in our public schools because of the experience that I had. My mom is a pre-K teacher. My dad was a salesman. My wife is an artist and a small business owner. And I'm running for controller because I want to make the city more livable and more affordable for working families. And I think that the best and sharpest tool that we have in the arsenal to do that is that $115 billion budget. You know, the Post will tell you that rich people are leaving the city. It's not true. We all know working families are leaving the city because the costs are too high and they're getting squeezed out and priced out. We have 115 billion reasons and ways that we can make the city more affordable by investing in the programs and priorities that would bring down the cost of living for working families. I'm talking about early childhood education. I'm talking about investing in CUNY, in our parks, in our libraries, in arts and cultural institutions, and getting serious about universal childcare. These are all the things that I want to prioritize, and we cannot sit on our hands while the city spirals out of reach for working families. We have a way to do it. We have a way to fix it. And I think that's done through the Comptroller's office, especially over the next 4 years with whatever fresh hell Donald Trump is going to send our way every day. We build a firewall around the city by how we spend our money. That's how we can take care of each other. And that's what I would do if I'm elected Comptroller.
Thank you so much. So your first question on here, what will be your first audit?
I'd probably start with HPD. I think we are in a housing crisis right now, and I don't think that HPD has been given the tools they need to meet the moment. HPD is working with about a $2 billion budget. It's barely 2% of our city's budget. I don't think that equals housing crisis. I think they need more staff. The mayor has completely hollowed out some of these agencies that are now downright skeletal. I'm working on 3 100% affordable housing developments in Coney Island. 2 of the towers are already built and fully, rented. The 3rd tower, another 100% affordable tower, about 600 units. I'm barely exaggerating when I'd say that they could probably put this tower up quicker than HPD could process that paperwork. And it's because the mayor has absolutely hollowed out some of these agencies. I would also audit the Department of Education. I come from a family of teachers, of public school teachers. I used to work for the Department of Education. I don't know a single public school teacher in this city that would tell you that they feel like they're working with a $35 billion budget in their classroom. And we're not getting the outcomes that we need for a world-class education for our kids. So those would probably be the top 2 agencies I would start with.
Thank you. How would you protect taxpayers from the misuse of city funds by government and non-government actors like companies, not-profit organizations, contractors, things like that?
Sure. It's a great question. I am the guy who wrote the law that says if you're convicted of public corruption, that you cannot seek office again. I think everyone deserves a second chance, but you don't get a second chance to betray the public trust. So if you're an elected official and you're convicted of public corruption, my law bars you from running for office again. This was a law that I passed years ago before I even thought about running for Comptroller. There's a lot of safeguards. There's a lot of things we could be doing. Nonprofit payment is an absolute crime and an abomination on our city right now. The work that our nonprofits do, the crucial and critical work that our nonprofits do, and the way that the city treats these nonprofits is absolutely criminal. A company like DocGo, these fly-by-night, no bid contract organizations, the mayor will write them a $400 million check without even blinking an eye, while our pre-Ks and our nonprofits that do great work with kids and our most vulnerable and homeless people, they're still waiting to get paid. I have a bill that would put the city on the hook for the interest on the loans that these nonprofits take out while they're waiting and languishing, waiting to get paid. I've never gotten a quicker phone call from OMB than when they saw that bill go up. And that was my whole point, that I just want to fix this thing. When the mayor first got elected, he cleared out about $6 billion in owed payments. So it shows that it can be done. We just need to focus on it for more than 10 minutes. Our nonprofits should not, we treat our nonprofits like partners, like family, and we ask them to do critical work that the city can't do on its own. But when then payday comes, we treat them like strangers. It's an abusive relationship, frankly, and it's got to end. It's one of my top priorities as Comptroller.
So expanding on that, how would you use the office differently than the current or previous comptrollers have used it?
Sure. I would say I would like to do more managerial audits, and really dig into some of these agencies and better understand their flow charts and really get into some of that, chip away at that rust and redundancy in some of these agencies. I think a lot of our processes are crippled by bureaucracy. And it's not only frustrating, but it's costing us money because of that dysfunction. Again, I go back to, I worked at the Department of Education. There's a lot of great people that work at DOE, at Tweed, but there's a lot of waste there. There's a lot of calcified dysfunction. And that's why you've got a $35 billion budget and people scratching their heads and saying, how is that possible? So we've just got to do more. And we have to make sure that we're really diving into these agencies. And the audit really needs to be a means to an end, right? You do the audit, but when you put forward what you found from the audit, that's not enough. Now you have to actually take the audit and work with your partners and the city and state level for the proper policy prescriptions to fix the things that you found, to fix what's broken. And I'd want to do more managerial audits. I think that would be really interesting and something that we're not doing right now.
So as a public employee myself, city employee, what would your top priorities be when reviewing the current pension investments and possible divestments? And what is your long-term vision for NYC's financial future?
So I think we could be doing a lot more with our pension fund system. It's almost $300 billion pension fund system. I think the power dynamic is a little backwards right now. You're seeing red states where these smaller pensions are going to their money managers and they're saying, look, if you want our pension business, we want you to divest from alternative energy. They're saying we only want you to invest in oil and gas if you want our money. It's completely insane, but it's working. The money manager is saying, fine, we want your business, so we'll do what you say. We need to do the same thing, but on the opposite. We need to tell people, look, if you want to manage our $300 billion pension system, then you need to get the hell out of oil and gas and coal investments. And if you're managing our money, then you cannot be managing other money and other oil and gas projects. If you won't do that, we'll go down the street and get someone else to manage our money. The power dynamic is completely backwards. I also want to use pension funds to invest in the creation of affordable housing for city workers. We need to dream big again. Somewhere along the way, the city that came up with Mitchell Lama stopped dreaming big, and now we're celebrating when we keep the libraries open for 7 days a week and get the grass cut in the parks. We need to dream big again. I'm talking about places like Co-op City in the Bronx, Penn South in Manhattan, Elecchester. These are all ideas for Manhattan Plaza, for artists and creative people and city workers. I have a plan where I would take pension money to invest in the creation of affordable housing, specifically for teachers, for nurses, for first responders, for folks who, frankly, some of them have to live in the city in order to do their jobs, but they can't afford to. And I think we could be doing a lot more with our pensions.
So a week after the general election last November, the current comptroller issued the report, quote, Protecting New York City, analyzing the risks that the Trump administration poses to the city's budget, economy, infrastructure, and people. It's a Lander title if I've ever heard one. Did you read that report? And how would you address the biggest risks, including risks to immigrants, that the administration poses to New Yorkers?
I sleep with that report under my pillow. Look, the federal contribution to the city budget is just about 10%. It's not nothing. The DOE budget, federal contribution is about $3 billion. So this is a very, very serious threat. And right now we've got a mayor who's rolling out the red carpet and rose petals for Donald Trump. What we need is someone who's actually going to sit down and figure out what these attacks are actually going to mean for our bottom line. Because when you talk about building that firewall around the city of New York to make sure that we're taking care of each other, we can't just wait for these cuts to come. We're already seeing them coming. He's already showing us his hand, and he's showing us who he is. So right now, our team on the council side, we're doing a deep dive because frankly, the city hall is not doing it. So we're going to do a deep dive to better understand what these cuts would mean for our city budget. And as we head into another budget cycle and more budget negotiations, we're going to have to really have a serious conversation because look, if the president comes and tries to cut our SNAP benefits, then we know that on the city level, we have emergency food assistance. We don't have the type of money that the federal government gives us, but we do have different analog programs that we're going to have to beef up, and we're going to have to rely on our nonprofits who do immigration work on the ground day by day. The thing that the city did wrong from day one with the migrant crisis was instead of trusting organizations like the New York Immigration Coalition and the myriad organizations out there that do fantastic on the ground immigration work, instead they hooked up with a company that was run by some former contestant on The Apprentice, and they gave these guys a blank check. We need to be keeping it in-house and relying on the organizations that do that work right now.
Cool. So how will you use the power of the Comptroller's office to support tenant protections and enhance affordability for New Yorkers? I know you already mentioned HPD, so this kind of goes on that.
Yeah, I think, look, I think number one, if you're building anything on public land, it has to be 100% affordable. Number two, you have to make sure that you're fighting like hell to make sure that you're building affordable housing so that people can afford to live here. And I think there are ways to work with the state. We were just up for a Tin Cup Day on Tuesday, and you hear the upstate Republicans all grumbling about how much money New York City gets. You have to remind them that 50% of the operating budget for New York City for New York State actually comes from New York City money. So we have to get serious about taking care of ourselves and working with our partners in Albany as well. Like I said before, to dream big again. You don't hear these big ideas anymore. And my plan to build housing for New York City workers, I think, is a plan where we can actually make that happen. It's not such a dream that's out of reach. It's something that we can actually do. We can invest pension funds to build affordable housing, to keep New Yorkers here, to keep working families here. It's good for our economy, and it's good for our long-term economic health.
And how would you use the Comptroller's audit and investigation powers to respond to corruption and wasteful spending in the NYPD, such as the recent overtime scandal and the millions in settlements that we, the taxpayer, pay annually for police misconduct?
Sure. So last year, the NYPD spent about $1.1 billion in overtime. They went about $141 million over what they told us they were going to spend. I have faith in Commissioner Jessica Tisch. I think she's incorruptible. I think she understands what a problem the overtime issue is. I do think it's a managerial problem ultimately. You'll hear the police union saying, well, we need to just hire more cops. The dirty secret is that it's actually cheaper to pay cops overtime than it is to hire more cops. So ultimately, I do think that Jesse Tisch is going to get this under control, but one of my first audits would be the NYPD to understand better how they're financing this money. The NYPD likes to blame the council and say, well, we're spending too much on overtime because of protests and parades, which is a bunch of baloney. Overtime has become part of just the status quo, that there's officers who rely on this overtime. And whether it's extended tours, you work 3 days in a row and then you get 2 days off, like that kind of thing. There are things that we can do to bring those costs down. What's happening now is completely unsustainable and not something that I will stand for. Because it's, like you said, this is our money, right? It's taxpayer money. Let's not forget that.
And last but certainly not least, what is your position on the construction of new casinos in New York City, across the whole city and in the boroughs?
I am a casino skeptic. I think we could all take out our phones right now and gamble right now. So I think the days of the casino being the only place in town where you could gamble are over. I represent Coney Island, where there's an applicant in Coney Island. We need a lot of things in Coney Island. We need jobs, we need housing, we need investments in infrastructure. I don't hear a lot of constituents coming up to me and saying what we really need is a casino. And I'm an old school politician who actually does this crazy thing where I listen to my constituents. And there is a robust community process. It's the community advisory committee for the casinos. I'm going to listen to my constituents. And if they don't want it, then I don't want it. If they want it, then I want it. But right now, I'm not hearing good things.
Thank you very much, council member. It was a pleasure.
Oh, right on. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So next up, we'd like to call up Joseph Criscone on behalf of Indivisible Brooklyn.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Criscione with Indivisible Brooklyn. What's that? That's okay, everybody does, so that's quite all right. And I'd like to introduce Mark Levine. Mr. Levine? Hi, how are you? Come to the front, please. Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. Yeah, kind of. It's kind of that way. Mark Levine, he's the current Manhattan Borough President, and he was previously a council member from the Upper West Side, I believe. He's now running from Comptroller. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Comptroller.
I would love to do that, but can I stand up or is that like
You could
what
stand
are
up.
the rules here?
You
in
could
Brooklyn?
walk around the room. You could do anything you like.
All right. Well, hello, Brooklyn Democratic Clubs. Awesome to see all of you. I want you to know, you might not know this, but in Manhattan, Democratic clubs always ask me, like, how can we be more like IND or CBID or LID? And you have very good PR, clearly. The answer I tell them is you got to do the organizing work. You guys show up, you fight for Democrats up and down the ballot. I'm thrilled to be able to spend a couple minutes with you tonight. After a rough few weeks for America, not just for Democrats, Trump has turned out to be more cruel and more chaotic than we feared, and we knew it would be bad. This I know. Local government and local politics is going to matter more than ever right now, and that's why I'm standing up, running to be the next New York City Comptroller. This is a job I've been preparing for my entire career, as I've been fighting on behalf of this city my entire career, since I graduated from college with a physics degree. And I live just a few blocks from here, Clinton and DeKalb. This is where my story began. I actually was a teacher in the South Bronx back in those days. I taught at Junior High School 149, Elijah D. Clark Junior High School. Taught bilingual math and science. If you're thinking about my commute, yes, I rode the G train before the G train was cool. And I went on to found a community development credit union in Uptown Manhattan, inspired by my buddies, Mark Winston Griffith and Errol Lewis, who founded the Central Brooklyn Federal Credit Union. Were any of you guys around for that? Okay, you don't know that history. Well, we built a nonprofit, cooperatively owned bank in Washington Heights, helping low-income families access loans. And we have made, over the last 25 years, $100 million in small loans, helping families buy their first home computer, start a small business, even become owners of their own homes. When I got to the city council in 2014, representing the Upper West Side, just a little bit, but mostly West Harlem and Washington Heights, it was the peak of the eviction crisis. This was 2014. We had 25,000 evictions a year. I made my first bill when I got to the council, historic legislation to make New York City the first place in America to establish a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court. We had a 3-year fight, a pitched battle against the whole force of the landlord lobby. We won that fight. I didn't back down, and we have started the national movement. More importantly, we have changed housing court forever. And here in Brooklyn and across the 5 boroughs, when you face an eviction, you now have the right to an attorney. In my second term in the city council, I chaired the health committee during COVID. I got to know some of you during that very difficult time. I stood up for science. I stood up for good policy. I became the target of the national right because I was pushing policies that weren't always popular. I didn't back down again, and I've remained steadfast as a leader on public health ever since. As borough president in Manhattan, I put my heart and soul into standing up for people being attacked by the right wing, including our trans siblings, when CEC2 in Manhattan passed a shameful resolution targeting trans girls in sports. I led the fight against it, again, incurring the wrath of the national right. I didn't back down, and I'm going to stand up now as Donald Trump tries the same venomous act. I have fought for affordable housing with every fiber of my being. We have hundreds of units of affordable housing moving in Manhattan, thanks to those fights. This is the record of fighting that I'll take with me to be the New York City Comptroller. I will use pension money to invest in financing affordable housing around New York City that might not otherwise be built. I'll use the full force of auditing and investigation power to ensure that agencies deliver better for New Yorkers. And I'll fight for a broken mental health system, which is chronically underinvested, leaving people to suffer without the care that they need. We can do these things. We can make New York City more affordable and more livable for everybody. We can restore confidence in government. We can stand up to the venomous Trump agenda. I am running for New York City Comptroller to do these things, and I would be incredibly honored to have your support in this race. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a series of questions. We do have a time limit. We have 2 timekeepers up front, Susanna and Boomer.
I got you.
So the first question, and actually a lot of these questions you kind of answered in your introduction, but we'll go over them again. What will be your first audit?
It's hard to choose, but I'm going to say HPD. If you want to build affordable housing in New York City, you got to add 18 months to the timeline for them to approve the paperwork. There are people in shelters tonight who are waiting 18 months longer than they should because of that. That could be modernized and accelerated to the benefit of people who need that housing. Can I mention more agencies or I mean, look, NYCHA, there's manifold audits that need to be done of NYCHA. We have thousands of vacant apartments in NYCHA that sit there sometimes for 6 months and 9 months in the middle of a homelessness crisis. It's unacceptable. We have repairs that go unaddressed for years on end because of chronic inefficiency, not just underinvestment, but inefficiency in the way the repairs are structured there. In the Department of Education, the system for giving kids special ed services, and if they need it, giving them extra funding for that. It's completely broken. I have a child who went through it. It's heartbreaking for any family who needs it. There is much that we need a strong comptroller to do using these powers of audit and investigation to be independent and hold the next mayor accountable.
Great. How would you protect taxpayers from misuse of city funds by government and non-government actors such as companies and nonprofit organizations?
Okay, well, every contract in New York City has to be approved and registered by the comptroller's office. And there's times where the comptroller has to put their foot down. And I applaud the current comptroller, my friend Brad Lander, for putting his foot down a number of times on contracts that didn't look right. And he has fought to extract better terms and conditions there. This is what you got to do. You got to use the power of contract approval. I will do that across city government. You asked about holding corporations accountable too, I think. Sure. And there it's a different strategy. The New York City Pension Fund is a shareholder in every company in America, literally. And that gives us power for shareholder activism, to stand up to companies if they are shirking their responsibility to advance diversity and equity and inclusion and to celebrate trans Americans, or to gouge people by overcharging for prescription drugs, et cetera, et cetera. The New York City Pension Fund has the vote as a shareholder to push back. I will use that power aggressively to fight against corporate greed in New York City and nationally.
How would you use the office in ways that current or past comptrollers have not in order to support New Yorkers?
I want to compliment Comptroller Lander for really advancing our effort to divest from fossil fuels, from companies involved in extraction and pipeline work. He has really moved that ball down the field. I think there's still some more work to do there, but this is not in the form of a criticism, but I think we can and should do more to invest pension money consistent with our fiduciary responsibility to our retirees. Some of you may be current and future retirees. We can invest more of that money in financing affordable housing in the 5 boroughs of New York City. The hardest thing about building affordable housing is actually not finding the properties. And believe me, that's hard. We have 300 projects now approved, ready to go. They're waiting for financing. You know how many we approve a year? How many we finance a year? 30. So if there's a vacant lot on this corner here, maybe owned by a church, they want to do the right thing, they want to have financing, you should assume a 10-year wait for that to get built. It's unacceptable in a housing crisis, in a homeless crisis. The comptroller can and should do more to help close those financing gaps. That will be one of my top priorities.
Next question, and you actually kind of touched on it in your answer. What would be your top priorities when reviewing the current pension investments and possible divestments? And what is your long-term vision for New York City's financial future?
Okay, well, you got to balance a couple key priorities in managing the pension fund. Paramount is you have to protect the assets of our retirees, right? They worked for retirement benefits, and we need to guarantee they have them. And so we have to do everything we can to invest wisely. We can also invest in ways that are consistent with our values. And I don't think that's a contradiction. Talked about divesting from fossil fuels. and you can move that money into green energy. That is the morally right thing to do in the midst of an existential climate catastrophe. It is also financially prudent because those companies that are vested in the fossil fuel industry are a risky investment risk. And the growth sector in energy is on the green side. So this is a perfect example of how we balance our goals of protecting the pension funds and ensuring that what we invest in is consistent with our values.
A week after the general election last November, the current comptroller issued a report protecting New York City, analyzing the risks that the Trump administration poses to the city's budget, economy, infrastructure, and people. Are you familiar with that report? And how would you address the biggest risks, including risk to immigrants, that the Trump administration presents?
Familiar with the report. Excellent report. Scary report, because it's a reminder that many critical agencies in New York City rely on federal funding. Schools, $2 billion. ACS, Child Protective Services, over $2 billion. Housing Agency, over $1 billion. NYCHA, billions, plural. The loss of that money would devastate things like childcare and support for tenants and myriad education services. This is serious. It also finances nonprofits throughout the city. And we had a 24-hour existential crisis here last week when contracts that had already been approved, people had already done the work, they had already spent the money, they got frozen out of their portals. They couldn't access funding. This would cause nonprofits to close. A court intervened. Trump backed down, proving we can beat him even in this era. But the city could do more by expediting payment on its own contracts to help float payment delays in the Trump era. And as to your broader question about fighting back, this has been a rough 2.5 weeks. I'm not going to lie. It's been a very rough 2.5 weeks. It's hard to look at the headlines. It's like one punch in the gut after another. It would be very, very easy to just block it out and curl up in a ball and wait for the storm to pass. And I get that. That cannot be our strategy. We have got to stand up boldly and denounce the venomous actions of the Trump administration. When they target immigrants in our city, when they target our trans siblings, when they try and roll back reproductive rights, when they try to harm our standing in the world by canceling foreign aid, we need to fight back boldly. And this election is one way to do that. We need to elect Democrats at every office in New York City, up and down the ballot, who are willing to use the powers of New York City government to protect our people, to protect vulnerable New Yorkers, to protect our interests, and to fight back. And that is why I'm running to be comptroller.
How will you use the power of the comptroller's office to support tenant protections and enhance affordability for New Yorkers?
Yes. So in addition to what I've already spoken a lot about, financing new construction, we have a lot of buildings all over the boroughs, including Brooklyn, Mitchell-Lama, HUD 202, that are in danger of expiring out of their affordability programs, right? And that will lead tenants caught out. This has happened in hundreds of thousands of units across the city already. This is a perfect use of pension money to take existing affordable housing and extend the regulatory agreement with financing from the pension funds. It's safe, has a huge impact. This is protecting existing tenants. I also talked about what's happening in housing court. Very proud of the law we passed, establishing a right to counsel. What I didn't mention is that it's currently underfunded. And there are tenants every day who face an eviction in housing court, who go to the legal aid provider assigned to that courthouse and are told, I'm sorry, we've run out of attorneys. You're going to have to, this will be a per se case. You're going to have to defend yourself in this eviction proceeding. That's unconscionable. We passed a law in New York City establishing right to counsel. I will fight as comptroller for the investments that we need in the tenant legal service program and for better contracts for the providers so that no one in New York City ever faces eviction without their right to an attorney being fulfilled.
Last question. What is your position of casinos in New York City?
Well, We only have 5 applications in Manhattan, so pity me for that. I'm not going to make an official announcement on those. They're all coming before me. I'll just say that there's a very.
What? Get out.
Why?
This is a private event.
Bill Casino.
This is a private event. Get out.
But it's public.
This is a private event. Yes, and this is, we also told you that hecklers would be removed.
What? I'm not.
Yes, we knew what you were doing. Get out.
Please leave. Please leave. You're being disruptive. Oh my God. No.
Being a disturbance. Please, 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 now. And we did, we're asking the question.
We asked a question and he will answer. No. No. We're going to have to call security. Sorry. He's going to answer the question I asked.
You are not being that tackle. You are being a disturbance. You need to leave now. We'll be calling it.
Let Boomer handle it.
You are not heckling. You are being a disturbance.
Am I disturbing you now?
Yes, you are. You're screaming at everyone. I won't have people for TikTok content. Wow, nobody cares. Wow. Nobody gives a fuck.
I do not. No, I don't.
No. Thank you. I'd like to thank Borough President Levine for speaking with us. We're now going to hear from the next speaker. We're going to hear from the next candidate. Thank you.
Got enough content for that?
No, I didn't.
I'm so sorry you didn't get your proper content. Let's.
We have a program and we're going to be hearing. We're hearing from the next candidate for public advocate. That's not what we're talking about next. Everybody wants to get out of here by 9:30.
Because you are being a disturbance to a private event.
It's not private. I signed up online.
We're in a private space.
Anyone who is being disturbing.
I'm not disturbing. I didn't.
You are very disturbing people by being up there right now.
No.
Hey, what do you?
I didn't open my mouth. Did I heckle? I didn't say a word.
Medication. We're going to continue the program. Thank you very much. We first need you to leave. Well, how could we ignore her? Why don't we take a 10-minute break? Why don't we do that? We're going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
You could have submitted the questions online.
Find out.
I didn't say anything. David Campbell here for all of you present the audience. And clearly, you to have a mask on.
Which one is better? The mask or my
Don't
face?
give her the viral moment she wants.
Come on.
Well, you know, you at least left to finish. Well,
My co-host for this and everybody in the audience, I would just ignore this individual until security removes them. Content is clearly what this person wants. Again, thank you everybody who's here tonight for the constructive Seamus, for the constructive conversations we've had. Assemblymember Raj Kumar, thank you for being here. We will be on that spot next. I don't know if Borough President Levine is still here, but again, thank you to him for also being with us. Luckily, we were able to get to the final question there, and he was able to answer all of the questions without interruption. To the family and friends that are watching on Zoom, how are you? You come here often?
Break. Are we minute 5 or 6? Can I get the mic?
So, you know, it was really cool today.
Okay. Is Shimani here? Yeah, I think he is.
No, there's no reason.
Would you like to sit down and then we
there's
can
no
start?
reason to communicate with her, everybody.
Boomer.
Who do you guys think is going to win the Super Bowl this year, by the way? I have really no sense. The Chiefs, probably. Probably. I think that's where the smart money is on. The real interesting thing is the Veselka that opened near me in my neighborhood actually is going to be having a buffalo chicken wing version of pierogies just for that event. And I'm actually like low-key excited to try them.
But if you sit down, I'll start if you sit down. How about that? Sit down and be an audience member and we'll start. Well, then you're kind of at the stage. Don't we all? Don't we all? Yeah. I honestly expected your content to be better. Sorry.
We'll meet again.
It's not. I've seen your content before. This is not one of your best. It's not one of your best. Wait, you're. No.
One of the great things about New York City is our vibrant performing arts scene.
But you're not funny. You're not funny. I'm not. I wish I was laughing. I wish it was funny, but it's not.
You're
That's
laughing.
unfortunate.
Is security here?
Yeah. So you got that content for you. Great.
Mid content.
Come over here. Let him get his job. Let him just say I'm not a heckler.
All right, bye. All right, well, we're gonna begin. Well, that's 2025 for you, everyone.
I believe it was Beyonce who sang. A diva is a version of a heckler.
You know, the
No,
past.
I don't listen to music anyway.
The past 2 weeks have been tough, and you know, some people express it in different ways. All right, so I think we could start again the program.
Testing.
Thank you all for your patience.
Testing, can you
Test-
hear?
Okay, all right.
All right, everybody.
All right. Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Let me just make sure. So up next is going to be our next candidate. By the way, I'm Carlos Calzadilla, president of Brooklyn Young Democrats. Our next candidate is actually Jamani Williams, who's our next public advocate candidate. And he's the former New York City council member, and he was a former council member, currently serves as the public advocate, an office that he has held since 2019. Welcome, public advocate Jimani Williams. Thank you. Good. So you're gonna be able to start with your intro. You have a total of 15 minutes. You can use it however you want, and then we'll go through questions.
Okay. I can sit down.
You can sit down. You can walk. You can scream. Actually, I would recommend it, but people have done it before today.
Peace and blessing, love and light to everybody. Thank you for everybody being here, all of our Brooklyn clubs who come together. As mentioned, my name is Jimani Williams, public advocate of the city of New York. I actually have Tourette syndrome, so I could kind of just do a lot of stuff, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I am a New Yorker through and through, a Brooklyn school baby, Brooklyn public school baby, from preschool to masters. I'm actually an organizer by training. It was long before Barack Obama, so I always remind folks, no one had any idea what that was back then. My mother asked me to please get a real job. This is a true statement, and I had to explain to her that it actually is a real job. Then I ended up running for city council against an incumbent. We won, got elected, and I've been literally trying to cause as much trouble as I could since that time period. I was told that I had to choose between being an elected official and being an organizer, and the work I did as an activist. I said, I don't think so. The best elected officials are actually organizers and activists, in my opinion. So it was important to me to show that you can do the politics the way I wanted to do it and be productive. So in the public advocate's office, I'm very proud of the productivity of that office. We've expanded, I think, what people thought the public advocate office can do, so much so that we have other cities reaching out to our office, trying to see how they can create a public advocate in their city. We've testified in front of city councils, so very proud of that work. I'm very proud that we have passed more pieces of legislation as public advocate before, more than all of the public advocates combined before me. That was really important to show that you can push, you can pull, and you can be productive when necessary, from the gamut of housing, small home ownership, maternal health, to the trans community. We've run a gamut of bills that we've been able to pass, and I'm very, very proud of that. You have to be able to work with elected officials and be able to get things done. And you have to be able to raise public awareness of things as well. I will close by saying where we are right now is a perfect time to show when you have to work with folks and when you have to call them out. And if you are you're running for public advocate and you cannot clearly delineate that Mayor Eric Adams right now is more of an assistant to Donald Trump than a mayor of the city of New York, this is probably not the role for you. And so you have to be able to do all of those things at the same time. Push, pull, and be productive. I think it's a good combination of what we've been able to bring to the office. Thank you so much for the support I received in the room and other races, even some of the wild ones I did. And I would love to have that support again for the next 4 years.
Thank you. The first question. A performance that's actually worthy of clapping today. So you might be familiar with this, but the Public Advocate's Office has a citywide bully pulpit. On which top issues do you plan to focus your advocacy?
Thank you for bringing that. It's important to talk about the bully pulpit because the way you use that, some people call it publicity stunts, but others call it getting attention to things that may not be relevant to some folks or people who don't think it's relevant. And so we have used the bully pulpit, we have used the media to raise issues around public safety, to raise issues around housing and affordability. Quite frankly, I wish the Democratic Party did not ignore those issues the way they have, and I think we might have been in a different space, but that's for a different forum. And so what we're trying to do now is really highlight the ways that we're all connected, because Donald Trump is coming after everybody. And I tell folks, be careful of where you put your marker of bias, because someone else's marker includes you. And so we're trying really hard to use the bully pulpit to push back on what Donald Trump is doing in all spaces. And those spaces from DEI, canceling Martin Luther King Day, to the mass deportation, to taking away birthright citizenship, to what's happening with our trans siblings. All is about erasure and about criminalizing the existence of people. And so we want to use our office to really bring publicity to that, if you want to call it. We're also proud in COVID, we're actually able to, because of some of the press work we did, get some federal assistance during COVID to a nitric complex, and I was really proud of that.
Thank you. You might also be familiar with this one. The public advocate has the ability to introduce legislation. So what legislation would you plan to introduce, and how would you work with the city council to advance it?
This is where it's very tricky. And so you have to be able to work with your colleagues in government, and you have to be able to push when things are not going well. That's a very delicate dance, but you need both of those things. And I think we've shown that we can accomplish that. And so working with the city council, as I mentioned, over 30 pieces of legislation, combined, that's now about 100, just over 100 with the time in the city council. When we were in the city council, the city and state listed us as the most productive council member after the speaker, which I was proud of, because you can show that you can be the organizer and the activist and also get things done and be productive. And it's really important. Again, we highlighted some of the work we did from the racial impact study. Now, when you have a rezoning, you have to show the impact that will occur on the folks who have been living there for a very long time. We've done work around maternal health, lifted up our Black maternal health issues that we've done. We've done some work for our trans community so they can know their rights when it comes to the medical care they should be getting. That's now more important than ever. So we're going to stay on those, but we really need to push around public safety, making sure that we have safe, we have accountable, transparent law enforcement. But really, for me, I've been trying to see if we can get a better understanding in the community of what public safety is and it isn't. Our law enforcement partners have a very important role to play. But I'm going to, just if I can, ask some questions. How many people think crime is an issue? Public safety is an issue there? And how many people believe that our law enforcement have a role to play in that? And how many people think they can do it alone? And so wherever I ask those questions, those three questions are answered anywhere: Republican, Democrat, Black, white, brown. But that third question is where we're having a lot of trouble. And so what we're doing as public advocate is putting out platforms of how we can create public safety that supports our law enforcement, but not asking them to do everything. And not equating simply locking up as many people as possible, usually Black and brown communities, with safety, because we can't just lock up the children of the people we locked up 20 years ago and think it's going to be different, while understanding that there's real harm being committed to folks and they have to have justice and accountability. But we have to make sure we're creating public safety in a different way. And that is something that I've been working on for my entire career.
What criteria have you used and will you use as public advocate when making appointments to various governmental commissions and boards?
Well, it's interesting. We do get, it's one of the powers of the public advocate, CCRB, City Planning Commission. One of the things that we don't do is tell folks how to vote. And I was appointed to the community board by Lou Fiddler. And many people remember Lou Fiddler. We didn't agree on a lot of things, but I was always proud that he never asked me to vote a particular way. And so I took that in my appointments. I try to make sure I'm appointing people that have the values I have, like Leah Gurwitch from the City Planning Commission. One of the things I want to make sure is that there are a pool of applicants from communities that don't always get that option. So for me, it's not specifically saying we have to hire or we have to appoint any one particular person, but I want to make sure there's a diverse pool. And people don't understand that's what DEI, which is not a bad word, is about: just making sure there are qualified applicants who are women, who are Black and brown, who are immigrants, who are disabled in that pool, so that we can then pull from that pool. We've done that very, very successfully. And then we want to make sure that they have the same values I do with whatever appointment that we're making.
On which city agency or agencies would you focus your recommendations for reform? Which tools of the public advocate office would you deploy?
You know, we've done a lot of focus on a lot of agencies. I do think NYPD is a big one. I think HPD is another big one, and the Department of Education. But I have to say, it's really, sometimes I don't necessarily use the word reform, because, and this is just a broader macro thing, sometimes I think the system is working how it was designed. And so I don't know about reforming. We actually just need a new system. So like when it comes to public safety, and I've done a lot of work, people know around abuse of stop, question, frisk and things like that, but I notice it just comes back with another name. And so sometimes we're playing whack-a-mole. And so right now it's really trying to get in the consciousness of, okay, how, when, Why do we use policing? And when do we use it? And is there accountability and transparency in it? And I think if we can focus there's a lot more changes that we can do instead of the whack-a-mole. Unfortunately, we have an administration in the Adams administration that does not like transparency and does not like accountability. And that runs the gamut of most of the agencies. I am thankful, though, that there is a lot of people in government who are trying to do the right thing under some very hard circumstances. So we try our best to help them as well. But those are probably the ones that we do a lot of work and focus on. And it's tough. It's tough turning the ship. But again, I'm sorry, the fact that the Democratic Party allowed rich billionaires to take the mantle of affordability is wild to me. And so we've been really trying to push on affordability and public safety, and we've been successful on it. I don't think people realize from 2012 to 2018, when I did the work on the abuse of stop, question, frisk, and we got a landmark legislation passed, including creating the gun violence task force. They told us the sky would crack open, black and brown people fall from it, they would destroy the city. That's not what happened. From 2012 to 2018, we became the safest we'd ever been. Then the pandemic hit. And we now have people forgetting that we have a pandemic, and they want to have knee-jerk reactions to things that I think are harmful. And we have a mayor that has been pushing that, and we need to have a public advocate that's willing to stand up and say, no, we can't do this, and acknowledge that there's harm happening and real victims that we have to address. And that's a hard thing to balance, but we've done a really good job.
Thank you so much. Given the federal administration's focus on mass deportation and ICE collaboration, how do you plan on using the powers of the Public Advocate's Office to protect immigrant New Yorkers? And actually, just in the news, the Daily News, it came out that apparently the mayor is rolling out a plan to allow these agents into schools if the staff feels threatened by the presence of these kids. So it just came out. I think it's very relevant to this question.
And again, you have to be able to say that Eric Adams is a problem when it comes to this. If you cannot say that about the mayor right now, this is not the job for you, because we need people who are going to stand up in the dearth of that leadership and protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers. And we do not have that. And it is disappointing, because I think we had an opportunity to do that. One of my proudest moments, as some people will call, some people will say publicity stunt, but one of my proudest moments was standing in front of an ambulance to stop the deportation of Ravi Ragbear when I was a council member. The reason that means a lot to me, because sometimes you don't know if the things you do have an impact. And 2 weeks ago, I'm in church, and Ravi Ragbear says he got a pardon from President Biden. And if we didn't do what we did then, he would have been deported and not been in this country right now. And so that's why I say you have to use every tool possible to get in the way, whether it is getting the media, whether it is civil disobedience, whether it is getting good appointments, whether it is passing legislation, whether it is making sure you're pushing back on a mayor who doesn't want to stand up. That's the job of the public advocate. That's what we've been doing. I think that my record shows that, and that's what we want to continue doing in the next 4 years. I wish that we didn't have to continue doing what we've been doing, but we do. And I'm worried about this mayor. I'm worried about the possibility of a Cuomo mayoralty, and you'll have to have someone that has experience in pushing and pulling when necessary to protect those folks. Lastly, I want to say, and I see we're running out, but it's important because they are good at pitting communities against each other. And so I'm a black male from the Caribbean community. I've been surprised to hear what I hear Caribbean folks saying, and I have to remind people that yes, there's a price tag for the migrants, but that is not the reason you didn't get what you needed. That money has always been there, and you should not let the people who didn't spend that money on you blame another group of people. And so in Brazil, they have a saying when they're elected, they're authoritarian, no one let go of anyone's hands. And that's what we're leading with. We want to make sure no one is letting go of everyone's hands, because we have to lead together, telling folks that the reason you don't have healthcare is not because of our Chan siblings. As a matter of fact, if we all come together, we all can get the healthcare we need. That's the type of messaging that we need and the type of leadership we need in the city.
We have 3 questions, so we'll try to go through them left. How do you plan to use the oversight and investigations powers of the Public Advocate's Office to protect New Yorkers against corruption?
We have tried our best with the oversight and investigation. Just to let folks know, we actually have less money than the borough presidents, which is a whole other thing. People don't know that. But I think we've done outsized work compared with what we have. The law says they have to respond to us. If they don't respond, we have to sue. And sometimes it gets a little tricky. But we will continue to use all the powers we have to call out the corruption we see. You can go on our website and see the reports that we put out that have helped expose some of the corruption. We are now trying to fight to strengthen the office, hopefully try to get some subpoena power that will help us with the oversight and the biggest investigation. But we use the bully pulpit pretty well as well to try to highlight these things.
As public advocate, how would you balance the role as watchdog for the mayor while also collaborating with the administration where possible to advance the interests of New Yorkers?
That is the trick. But I think we do. I've stood with the mayor, and I would stood with the mayor right now if the right thing is being done. So when he was making announcements that made sense, you stand with him. The job of public advocate is not to be friend or foe. It's to do what's best for the city. And so you stand with elected officials, whomever they are, when they're doing the right thing, and you have to call them out when they're not. Both of those things are important. But I will say what we've been able to accomplish legislatively, what we've been able to accomplish policy-wise, things that we've been able to get funded, shows that we have the right mix of being able to work with and push against and still be productive for the residents of New York City.
Thank you. And just last one very quickly, you might be familiar with this, but the public advocate becomes mayor if the mayor steps down or is removed. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that. So I just wanted to make sure you did. Normally that would be an unlikely event, but it feels a bit different this year. And with yourself here, if that were to happen, what's the first thing you do as mayor? And you have like 15 seconds.
Well, no, I think many people didn't know that before. They absolutely know it now. When you're living between, you could be a mayor in a minute or never. It's very difficult. But we've talked about plans in case that happens. It's not something we're wishing, so just so that know. But I believe one of the first things we might do is just make sure that everybody has filled out their COIB trainings and understands what they can do and what they can't do in terms of corruption in the city.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Johnny Williams.
Appreciate
Thank you. Give it up for
Appreciate
him. Okay. Our next moderators. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Zoe Gabby, and I have the honor this evening of introducing Jennifer Rajkumar, our next candidate for public advocate of the evening. Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar represents Queens 38th District and previously was a Democratic district leader from Lower Manhattan. Welcome, Assemblymember Rajkumar. And would you like to first introduce yourself to the group and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, good evening, Brooklyn. And when I'm here, I'm reminded of a great Brooklynite. Her name was Shirley Chisholm. She said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. My name is Jennifer Rajkumar, and I've bought my folding chair with me wherever I've gone in my life and made my own place. My parents came to this country with just $300 and one suitcase. My mom was born in a mud hut in India. I feel blessed to have been born in the United States, the greatest country in the world. And to honor everything that this country gave my family, I decided to dedicate my life to public service. So I went to UPenn, I went to Stanford Law School, and I became a civil rights attorney because I've always believed that lawyers can save the world. My first case out of law school was on behalf of 4,000 women who were experiencing discrimination. When they got pregnant, they were demoted or fired. That's illegal, but it happens every day. We won the lawsuit and secured justice for 4,000 women. The UN called it one of the top 10 cases in the world advancing women's equality. I went to work at the National Women's Law Center in DC to preserve our reproductive freedom across the country. I still cannot believe that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. I wake up sometimes and I can't believe we live in a post-Roe era. But I am ready to fight. I left to join politics. Why? Because I realized if you really want to make a difference, you need power. So I worked for the governor directing immigration for the state of New York during the first Trump era. And I said, do you want me to start my job early? because the president had just instituted the discriminatory Muslim ban. Completely unconstitutional and discriminatory. So I started the job early. We pushed back against all of the xenophobic, discriminatory policies coming from the first Trump administration. And I'm so proud to say I built a first in the nation program, $31 million, to provide legal counsel to every single immigrant in an immigration proceeding who could not afford a lawyer. That saves lives. Did you know your chance of success in an immigration proceeding increases by 14 times if you have an attorney? I was so proud to do this work. Then I returned to my roots in South Queens and did the impossible. I ran against an 11-year incumbent who was anti-choice and anti-LGBT rights and said, I'm going to become the state assemblywoman. Everyone said to me, Jennifer, you're a nice girl. You got no shot. But we won. And we won by the largest margin of any challenger in the state, against the Democratic Party, against the establishment. And I secured victory and made history as the first South Asian American woman ever elected to a New York State office. Thank you. So I stand before you today, and I'm proud to say that my record of impossible wins has continued. In the state legislature, I gave New York City the power to close down all of these illegal smoke shops that have been endangering neighborhoods that have been a complete nuisance on every corner of this city. I said, we're going to smoke them out and shut them down. And I authored the Smoke Out Act. I'm proud to say I drove it through. The Smoke Out Act passed in the budget, and now we see all the illegal smoke shops closing. But I'm not stopping there. Now I'm working on e-bikes. Who here has almost been hit by an e-bike? A lot of hands. This is a universal problem. We got to stop it. That's why I proposed landmark legislation to make sure we regulate e-bikes. The state DMV will issue insurance and license plates and register all of these e-bikes so that we can hold them accountable and we can keep our streets safe. I'm proud to stand before you to say that I'm here to fight for results. It's not just about rhetoric for me. I love speaking at the rallies. I love speaking before you. But at the end of the day, real lives are at stake. New Yorkers are suffering. And I'm here to get results. That's what I do. That's what I live for. I live for this. And I think often of JFK, who says the life of service is a constant test of your will. But I'm willing to put the hard work in. And I'm so proud to stand before you today to say I'm running to be the next public advocate of the city of New York. And I'm here to love, care for, and empower all of the people of this city, especially the underestimated and the counted out. I'm here to make our government agencies work better. I'm here to give the people a voice. I'm here to push back against the federal administration. I'm here to work with all our leaders to make sure our city gets the support that it needs. And I have the tools and the experience and the courage to get the job done. So thank you so much for having me. And I hope to earn your support and to work with you in the trenches. Be happy to take any questions.
Great, I have a bunch. So the first question that for you tonight is, the Public Advocate's Office has a citywide bully pulpit. On which top issues do you plan to focus your advocacy?
Great, can I stand?
Of course.
Okay. Well, let's start with mental health, everybody. One reason I'm running for public advocate is because our city is in crisis. There's a loss of confidence in government. We've seen egregious violence on the subways and a mental health crisis that is spiraling out of control. Just a week ago, I introduced the Empire State of Mind Act to address our mental health crisis. It's a 20-page bill, completely comprehensive, that's going to overhaul our system at every level to make sure that we're giving people who are suffering from mental health issues and severe mental illness the support that they deserve. And what I do is I focus on all the points that they interact with institutions, where people with severe mental illness interact with hospitals, with the criminal justice system, with the shelter system, and to make sure at every step they're getting the support that they need so that they can recover, so that they can thrive. So I think that mental health often comes up in the news if there's an incident, but we have to stop waiting. We have to stop waiting for the next news story. Something needs to be done, and I'm already taking steps to address that. Then there's also quality of life issues in general. I mentioned smoke shops, e-bikes, all of the things that make daily living a little bit harder for New Yorkers. I'm going to tackle those head on so that from the moment you leave your apartment to the moment you come back, life is a little bit easier for you every day, because that makes a huge difference. Finally, a public advocate should be a strong advocate for New York City at the federal level. And I'm determined to make sure that New York City gets the resources that it needs from the federal government, no matter who's in charge, even if it's President Trump. And I'm going to make sure we mobilize the city so we can come together and fight back when our rights are threatened.
What legislation do you plan to introduce, and how would you work with the city council to advance it?
I've already mentioned several pieces of legislation, so I don't want to repeat them, but I will talk about a few other ones that I think are very important. There's legislation that I will back that will help New York City build faster and on budget. It's not right that so many projects like the Second Avenue subway take forever to get done and are significantly over budget. We must improve the process, which is why as a lawmaker, I've already passed and gotten signed legislation that will modernize the process by putting bidding online, okay, taking us into the 21st century so we can build faster. That's something that I think is going to drastically improve life in the city. Also, everything that focuses on our public transit, I believe that the greatest city in the world must have the greatest public transit system in the world. But in Japan, they have a high-speed rail. I could get to Albany in 20 minutes on a high-speed rail. We are behind the ball in New York City, so you can count on me to be focused on transportation. That includes looking at the MTA. Okay, where does all the money go? I think we all need to find the answer to that question. Those are some of the issues that I'll be focusing on.
Great. What criteria will you use as public advocate when making appointments to various government commissions and boards?
I look for people that really care. Okay, some of them I met in the room today. They approached me. And you can tell by the way they talk about an issue that they live and they breathe it. They care from here. You'll make the effort to come out, and you'll still be sitting in the chairs at 9 p.m. at night because you care so much. That's the life I lead too. You can call me at 11 p.m. You can text me anytime because I live for this. You live for this. That's why you're here. That's what I'm going to look for, number one, that they care, they're committed, they're passionate, and it's not just about them, that it's about the city. It's about community. So that's the number one thing that I'm going to look for.
Okay. On which city agency or agencies would you focus your recommendations for reform, and which tools of the public advocate's office would you deploy?
Well, I'm glad you put the plural, agencies, because there's more than one agency that I'm going to look at. First, let's start with NYCHA. Okay, a history, years of corruption and mismanagement. It must end today. Repairs on NYCHA apartments. Repairs don't get made. I've been up and down NYCHA buildings. It's not right that people have to live in conditions and have to wait for these repairs. The people I know who live in NYCHA complexes, they have all the potential in the world. I literally have met young people that have the gifts and the talents to do anything. They must live in decent conditions. Okay, NYCHA must remain public as well. But then let's move on. I mentioned the MTA, okay, state controlled, a little bit of city control. All New Yorkers want to know, why is our transit system like it is, and where does all of the money go? Why are more than half of subway stations not even accessible? Okay, this is not acceptable. So definitely the MTA is going to be one of the main agencies that I look at, but also the DOT. Okay, I mentioned that we have a e-bike problem that is out of control. Okay, so I want to secure information from the DOT, figure out what data they're collecting, on this issue of e-bike collisions that are a problem on our streets. And then also the NYPD. Okay, there have been reports of rampant corruption in the NYPD. I think it's very important that that is looked into and that we demand the highest standards of integrity from law enforcement, who are brave people. They put their lives on the line for us every day. They have my full support. But we do have to make sure that that agency, we root out any hint of corruption that's in the NYPD. Lastly, I need to add Department of Education. The reason I have to add it is because education is the reason I'm standing here. It opens every single door. So I want to make sure that there's enough seats in the summer youth employment program for all the kids who want it. Okay, because there have been reports of kids not being able to access this critical life-changing program. I'm going to make sure there's an air conditioner in every school gym, okay, so that kids can actually learn. I've been already very actively involved in expanding food options in school cafeterias so that people from all cultures have food that they can eat. And I support initiatives like New York Reads, okay, which is changing our reading system. 72% of Black and Latino kids are not reading proficient in this city. That has to change. And you're going to have my full advocacy to make sure that that happens.
Okay. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So as public advocate, how would you balance the role as a watchdog for the mayor while also collaborating with the administration where possible to advance the interests of New Yorkers?
Thank you.
1 minute remaining.
Only 1 minute for this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very good at both of these things. I'm great at standing up, as I've told you in my biography. I've always stood up. The only way you can become the first South Asian woman elected in this state is to stand up. Going up against big corporations as a lawyer, standing up. But I'm also very good at working together because it's very easy to throw stones. But real change happens by getting along. That's why I have a very good relationship with the mayor of this city. I've gotten his support to drive through big initiatives that no one thought would be possible. Diwali is a city school holiday now because I got the support of the governor, the mayor, and all stakeholders to make the impossible happen. So I'm an expert collaborator, and the current public advocate is known for throwing stones. Throwing stones is fun. I could say I hate the mayor right now and make news. Okay, but have I helped anybody? No, I have not. I've made a news story, but I've not done any good for New Yorkers. I'm here to help people, not just to shout and scream. Thank you.
Can I do one more? Just one more question, real quick. Okay, so one specifically for you, why did you switch from running from controller to public advocate?
I launched my Comptroller campaign many months ago. Then something happened. We lost in November, and we lost big. And something else happened. A lot of people were killed because of egregious violence on our streets and subways. So I decided I could not just be comptroller. I had to step up and be a public advocate. A comptroller is a lovely position, very fascinating and interesting, but you're only focused on fiscal issues. As a public advocate, I can step up and address all of these issues. I have a bigger and broader platform to save our Democratic Party and to save our city. And you have my full commitment that I will do that with everything that I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I am back up and hopefully with a little less interruption and or maybe a little more fireworks, it could be entertaining. Our last candidate of the evening is Senator Kevin Parker, who serves as the chairman of the Committee on Energy and Telecommunications. Senator Parker, welcome.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? I appreciate everybody sticking around. Like, folks don't even look sleepy now, yawning or anything. How much time do I have?
15 minutes total for both your opening remarks and questions.
Okay. All right. I think I could
use
do
them
that.
however you wish.
Okay. I'm going to speak for 14 minutes. So 7 years ago, That's a little, history joke. Good evening again. I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. I'm the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, as you heard, as well as the senior assistant majority leader in the New York State Senate. I am running for city controller. Would love to have your support and your vote. And I'm running because I really think that I have both the experience and the vision for what this office needs at this place in this time. I have significantly more experience than anybody else in the race, having worked on Wall Street at Payne Webber. Some of you remember the investment bank Payne Webber. I remember the commercials, thank you, Payne Webber. Some of y'all too young for that, but full adults remember those commercials. But I worked for the chairman at Payne Webber and did municipal finance and government affairs there. Then worked for H. Carr McCall for a number of years, who was the state controller. And then have spent now 23 years because of the trust and grace and honor of my folks in my district, serving in the state senate, where I have been on the finance committee every single second and have spent over a decade on the banking committee and insurance committee. So the issues around public finance are in my blood, and it's something that I have spent a lot of time working on, thinking about, and really understand that in this moment, we really need somebody in that office who understands how to use the office in a way that helps all of our communities, right? 3 or 4 things that I think really have to be tackled. First is obviously the affordability crisis. I think you use the office in that way by doing a number of targeted reports about affordability in the state of New York on various issues and various communities, and figuring out how do you create a set of recommendations on how to lower costs for New Yorkers, first in the city government and then in the larger society. I have done that work even immediately here in the state legislature, where I have put forth a package of bills that would reduce utility costs for New Yorkers across the state of New York. We actually passed it 2 weeks ago, but this is a set of bills that I have passed over the last 3 years, and we're just waiting for the assembly and the governor to catch up, right? But this is something that I've done throughout my career, is looking at issues and figuring out how to address it. So we look at the state of New York around something, let's say like, again, as chair of energy and telecom, we look at the affordability package that the state has now around high-speed broadband, right? I wrote that legislation initially. We put it in at $10. I wanted to put it in at $5. We settled with the governor at 15, and then went to the courts and they raised it to 30. But we are one of the few states in the country that has a legislative rate for high-speed broadband. I believe that high-speed broadband is as important as water, heat, and electricity when you're moving into a dwelling place. Other issue, obviously, is housing, and I know everybody's talking about housing. We often talk about affordable housing, but the question is affordable for who? And I think really the question, and who the people who need the most help, are working families, right? And so I very rarely use the word affordable. I always talk about workforce housing, because in the community that I live in, we have teachers married to social workers who have no place to live, nurses married to transit workers who have no place to live. And it's a damn shame that you can grow up in the city, work here, and then not be able to afford to continue to live here. And I understand those struggles because I come from those families, right? I grew up in the Bushwick houses in Brooklyn, until I was about 10 years old, and then moved to where I live now at the junction right down the block from Brooklyn College. My father worked for the MTA actually his office was right around the corner on J Street. My mother worked at Brooklyn College. She was a member of DC 37 and also taught, and was also a member of the teachers union, right? And so I've come out of a place in which I've seen how working families struggle and how do you make ends meet. And that's certainly one of the things that I know housing costs is one of the biggest issues. And then the last one is really about creating full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits, right? And we have to move our economy from Wall Street to Main Street, right? And we really do that by helping entrepreneurs, particularly Black, Latino, and Asian ones. And we really have to make sure that we have a robust MWBE program that gives everybody an opportunity to be involved in the economy that we have here. New York is the third largest budget in the entire country, right? After the federal government, the state of California, and the state of New York, right? And then we're contracting out over 20-30 billion dollars every single year. And so it's really important that we make sure that every segment of our society has access to, because we know that when we put a woman into business and she's contracting with the city or the state, what does she do? She hires other women for those businesses. And we understand that the largest percentage of child poverty actually has to do with the connection between that mother and those children, right? And so we really have to make sure that folks in the margins of our society are getting access just to the economic opportunities that are already existing in our communities. And so I'm looking forward to earning your vote through this campaign process, getting your endorsement, and working to make sure that every single New Yorker has an opportunity to live, love, and thrive in our great city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So kick things off. As comptroller, what would be your first audit?
Oh, that's a good one. So similar to what you heard Jennifer talk about NYCHA. I think all of us who are state legislators, the frustrating thing about NYCHA, and again, I grew up in NYCHA in 360 Bushwick Avenue, right, is that people really don't realize that most of the NYCHA buildings are actually federal buildings, right? And so people come to the state and they say, well, you have to put billions of dollars in it. And we don't own it, nor do we actually manage it. Right? And John, I know we've put hundreds of millions of dollars into NYCHA, and then it's almost like a sinkhole. Like you give them the money, and then you have very little recourse to even make sure that the money is used in the right way. So I'm not taking a position in the public advocates race, but I was just here for her comments. But I agree with her. There's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse happening in NYCHA. We really have to understand how that agency is operating and make sure that it's really delivering for the people who live there, and making sure that we are making both repairs and presenting opportunities for the folks who live in NYCHA.
It actually segues perfectly to our next question. How would you protect taxpayers from misuse of city funds by government and non-governmental actors such as companies and non-governmental organizations?
So one of the things that we have to do is really look at first of all, the contracting process, right? The contracting process is just not a good process. And it's actually, it's not good on two folds. It's not really great in terms of how contracts, and there's not a lot of accountability about who gets contracts. And then we are executing contracts too slowly. And particularly on the nonprofit end, that's the second part, has become a real problem. And so nonprofit organizations, and there's tons of people, obviously, in our city and state who have city contracts who not getting paid on regular terms. And that certainly is creating financial hardships. And so I would look at both of those issues about both who's getting contracts, but then how are we executing contracts, and what's the process for making sure that people who are supposed to be getting paid actually get paid in a timely fashion.
Right. How would you use the office in ways that current or past comptrollers have not in order to support New Yorkers?
One of the things that I would do is I would actually create a collaboration with CUNY and the City Office of Small Business Services to create small business development centers all over the city. If we look at what is going to be our next best opportunity to create full-time jobs at a living wage, it's going to be from small businesses, right? And again, small businesses, no matter who's running them, have two problems, right? Access to capital and technical assistance, right? And we really ought to be using the expertise at CUNY and what's happening at the Department of Small Business Services, and combine them to make sure that we're spreading out that expertise. It's actually one of the things I'm most proud of that I've done in my own district, which was work with Senator Chuck Schumer and at the time Ed Towns to bring money to bring a small business development center to Brooklyn College that still exists to this moment, providing that kind of technical assistance and access to capital that our entrepreneurs need. This is particularly important for, again, Black, Latino, Asian, and women businesses, as well as, you know, people who are LGBTQ plus and transgender community in particular, where other kind of access to the labor market oftentimes is limited, right? And so entrepreneurship is really, and you know, and not just simply micro entrepreneurship, but just real small businesses are really critical if we're going to build our economy the way we need to take us into the future.
Awesome. What would be your top priorities when reviewing the current pension investments and possible divestments? And what is your long-term vision for New York City's financial future?
So my motto is that if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? And so the big thing when you're, you know, involved with these pensions is to make sure that the returns are as good as they can be, right? But I think you actually have to have some kind of moral compass as you in fact do that, right? And so you really want to do a top to bottom examination of where you're investing and making sure that those investments are in line with the values of the people of the city of New York. And looking at also, again, the contracting, even in there, like who's doing the audits, who's doing financial investments, who are the lawyers who are moving up, and making sure that, again, that you have that just equity is part of that, diversity is part of that, inclusion is part of that process, right? One of the problems that we have in New York is it's a home cooking problem. So both on the city and state level, we don't give preference to New York State investors, right? So if you're a money management company and you come to the city comptroller, a lot of times they make those decisions based on portfolios and track records, right? But if you're in California, they have a home cooking rule, which is that you get points on your application if you're from California. They do the same thing in Illinois. We don't do that here. And so when those folks come here, they actually have more money under management and more experience just simply because they've been given more opportunity in their home states. We need to figure out our matrix around that and figure out how do we create more opportunity for companies to do business with that agency in the way that it's consistent with how it happens across the country to provide more economic opportunity for New Yorkers, right, for their own money. And so that's one of the things that I certainly think is going to be really important as we go forward. Mm-hmm.
A week after the general election last November, the current comptroller issued a report entitled "Protecting New York City: Analyzing the Risks the Trump Administration Poses to the City's Budget, Economy, Infrastructure, and People." Did you read that report, and how would you address the biggest risk, including risks to immigrants, that the administration poses to New Yorkers?
I did peruse the report. I think that there is obviously a lot of more risk this time, right? And I think that part of what we're dealing with now is a lack of understanding about what our opportunities are on the city and state level, right? Conversations I've been having, Liz Kruger, the chair of the finance committees, we really ought to just, I don't know if people realize this, the federal government actually doesn't collect taxes, the state government does, right? So instead of paying them their money, we should hold on to it, right? And hold our peace and give them the rest at some point, right? But we really have to look at some creative options about how we're dealing with them if we're going to, we can't just be giving them money and then say, well, can we have the portion back that we're supposed to get, and then them telling us to go pound sand, right? And so we have to figure out ways to get around that. But I certainly agree with the city controller that there's a lot of peril in what's going on the federal level to the budget of the city of New York. The good thing about New York is that it's still New York. And so we have lots of ways to actually generate income and a lot of economic activity that happens here. So I don't ever think that if we manage it correctly, that we'll be fine from a cash perspective, but there will be pain. There will be pain if we don't figure out some ways to get around some of the things that are on the federal level.
In our last 30 seconds, Always an easy one. How would you use the Comptroller's audit investigation powers to respond to corruption and wasteful spending in the near NYPD, such as recent overtime scandal and the millions in settlements we pay annually for police misconduct?
Yeah, I think that you have to do audits, right? Like you have to audit the NYPD and see how these things are going, and then you have to also change policy. And so I have been literally one of the leaders on the issue of police reform in the entire state, right? After the murder of George Floyd, the state of New York was the only state in the entire country that passed a comprehensive set of police reform measures. There were actually 10 bills. 4 of them were mine, right? Including, creating a bill that creates an office in Tish James's office, in the Attorney General's office, that looks at police misconduct, right? And so we need to continue to do that work. I have 2 other bills that I'm hoping that we get passed. Actually, 3. I have a bill that looks at what force is, right? Excessive force and defining excessive force. Right now, it's not defined in state law. I have a second bill that actually creates teeth for the CCRB, right? Which is really, really important that we do. And I have another bill that actually would, and I'm only mentioning 3, I have others, but another bill that actually would if you had a excessive use of force claim, that the first monies come out of your pension before it comes out of New Yorkers' pockets. And I think if you do enact something like that, that would in fact curb some of the zealousness that we find in police who are, willing to abuse their power and authority.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay. With that, that is our evening. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for all of the clubs here. Thank you for the entertainment we had. And also, of course, a huge shout out to Brooklyn Law School for their hospitality, their staff, letting us use this space. They've just been complete menches. Thank you, everyone, and have a safe evening.